And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Weybosset Street, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and the mothership, our website at coalitionradio.us, where you will shortly find links to our new podcast, which will be premiering soon, not only just on Spreaker, but on iHeartRadio, and hopefully soon iTunes and Spotify. Let's get right into it. We've got several guests lined up for this evening. All of them have graced us with time on a Friday evening, all of them on our short schedule, so we want to get right down to what matters tonight. Over the last 5 years of Coalition programming, we've been blessed to have a handful of national think tanks join us on a regular basis. The Goldwater Institute is first and foremost amongst them. Their unique blend, if you will, of investigative reporting, think tanking, as we say in the Coalition, sample legislation preparation, and also outright reporting, investigative reporting, I believe is the antidote to the media blues that this country suffers from today. Immediately in the ending, if you will, of the Mueller investigation, the media scrambled for a couple of days, desperate to find something to obsess over that typically wouldn't matter in most of our lives. And they, quite frankly, after spending an afternoon with my father at his assisted living facility and watching 3 hours of all Biden all the time, I realized what we're going to learn about, what's going to matter to me in my life for the next 2 or 3 weeks until something else comes along. And that, of course, is the adventures of Uncle Joe Biden. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce our guest tonight. His name is Jacob Hubert. He is a senior attorney at the Goldwater Institute in Arizona. Just recently, he was involved in landmark litigation. The type of litigation has really the ability to alter not only just the legal landscape, but the manner in which almost all business operates. And I'm talking, of course, about the Janus case, Janus versus AFSCME. He brings to us now, this evening, a presentation and a conversation about what's happening, well, in the legal environment. On a superficial level, the notion is, of course, does someone have to belong to a union or a trade organization to engage in activities at a professional level surrounding that trade or pursuit? And that's at its most simplest level. But like many cases, there is so much more to it. And in this case, First Amendment issues really are at the center. So it is with great pride for the first time that I welcome attorney Jacob Hubert, a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School, to the Coalition. Thank you for joining us on a Friday night.
Thanks for having me.
So let's if we could, do a little retrospective, because while we often think of the Coalition radio show as a sort of wonk heaven, and a lot of folks who are either listening tonight or ultimately will listen to it are clearly engaged in the deepest levels of what goes on in government, as we say as libertarians. Give us, if you will, just kind of a brief snapshot of what happened in Janus, your involvement, and then now let's move forward to the current litigation, because this is as or more important. It's the next logical step.
Sure. Well, Janus versus AFSCME was a Supreme Court case, a case the Supreme Court heard last year, about whether the government can force its employees to give money to a union as a condition of their employment. And the Supreme Court said no. The First Amendment protects workers from being forced to pay for somebody else's political speech. And these public sector unions always used workers' money for political speech, and so they had a right not to give that money if they didn't want to. I was one of the attorneys representing the plaintiff in that case, a man named Mark Janus, who was an employee of the state of Illinois. I worked for an organization called the Liberty Justice Center at that time when I represented him, along with others from the National Right to Work Foundation. And so that was a great First Amendment win. You know, the government shouldn't be conditioning benefits it provides, including government jobs, on people giving up their constitutional rights. Mm-hmm. And so that was an important win for the First Amendment. And it's something that we're now trying to build on at the Goldwater Institute by challenging arrangements that they have in the majority of states where lawyers are forced to give money to a bar association and be a member of a bar association just to be allowed to practice law.
Now, I promised to my listeners in our promotion that this would be a lawyer-free, joke-free zone. I promised them that. But simply put, most of the listeners who are keyed in as libertarians or as civil libertarians who may not be identified as the big L all get that. But why is that important to the average person? What type of issues does that carry over to for the ordinary citizen?
Well, everyone should be concerned about their right to support and not support the groups of their choice, and support and not support the political advocacy that they do or don't want to support. The Janus decision affected many people because there were some 5 million government workers across 22 states who've been forced to give part of every paycheck to a union, whether they wanted to or not. And many of those workers didn't want to fund the public sector union's political agenda, but were forced to. And now all of those workers have a choice. And if we prevail in this other litigation, then all attorneys will have a choice as to whether they're going to fund bar association political advocacy. And those are the two major areas where governments have been doing this. But, the precedent set in Janus, and hopefully the precedent set in the Bar Association case, will help protect everyone against being forced to associate with and support groups that they don't want to support.
Right, because, and this is as a civilian, my interpretation, you've got these immense union/professional association golden war chests being accumulated, and they're being used for distinctly political purposes, which very often, if not always, are associated only with the individual fortunes of their, well, let's just say a distinct portion of their membership. And particularly when you look at both of these professions, they're almost like lasers against what might be in the public goodwill. And for example, one of the recurring challenges here in a state like Rhode Island, if not everywhere, are, well, the burgeoning pension crisis, the balloon, the bubble that's about to explode over literally the entire country. I mean, and we're talking about potentially $1 trillion issue. Union funds are certainly not going to be used to argue for some type of 401k hybrid solution towards a complex, nuanced issue. They're going to be overtly in favor of what's in the best interest of a very narrow core group of the constituency. They're not even that concerned with the integrity of these funds anymore. The assumption being that in the case of a municipal employee, well, the government has got a bottomless checkbook. They're not subject to the whims of the marketplace, so they can just have at it. In the case of in the legal community, of course, it's very nuanced. To me, one of the exigent crises facing this country is tort reform. If in fact these type of war chests can be used to fight tort reform, regardless of the individual membership's goodwill, then again, you've got money, some of it gathered through coercion, being weaponized for a political effort. What issues are being held up, or what do you think to the in terms of average everyday lunch pail issues are challenged, if you will, by lawyers having this vast pool of money?
Well, you make a great point. In the Janus decision, the Supreme Court recognized that unions had tremendous influence over politics through the things they did in collective bargaining, which they used members' mandatory fees to fund. In their collective bargaining, they were arguing for things like more pension benefits, more government spending in general, and even in my state of Illinois, where the Janus case came out of, higher taxes to pay for all the things that they wanted. So these forced subsidies for unions didn't just affect government workers. They affect everybody who cares about issues, the state fiscal issues and a wide range of issues on which the unions were advocating, where they were getting an unfair advantage because they were able to use money that people were forced to give them to advocate for their positions, while everybody else was limited to funds they could raise voluntarily to advocate for the causes they believe in. And so Of course, the unions are focused on things like pensions and worker salaries and things like that. Bar associations get involved in a wide range of issues. Tort reform is certainly one. We have one case that we just filed against the Oklahoma Bar Association. And in Oklahoma, the Bar Association had used member dues to advocate against tort reform, one of the issues they mentioned. They also advocate against changing the state's method of choosing judges. Oklahoma has a so-called merit selection system, and those systems really usually aren't about merit so much as they're about lawyers, in particular the plaintiffs' trial lawyers, having a lot of influence over who gets to be a judge. And when Oklahoma has tried to move to a system more like the federalist system, where the governor would appoint people and the Senate would confirm them, the bar has used mandatory member dues to vigorously and successfully oppose that reform. So those are two of the big issues that bar associations might get involved with, but they get involved with things across the board. For example, we represent a lawyer in North Dakota who was whose bar dues were used to oppose a ballot measure regarding child custody that he personally had supported with his time and money. And you might ask, what does that even have to do with the function of a bar association? And it would seem nothing. It's just they're using it for whatever their leadership wants to do politically. So you have things like that. We have clients in Oregon who saw their dues used to publish certain statements criticizing President Trump that had nothing to do with the practice of law. And whether you think President Trump should be criticized or not, that's obviously a political sort of statement that has nothing to do with regulating lawyers, which nobody should be forced to pay for. So these bar associations get involved in all kinds of issues, and they do it using the money of people who don't have a choice as to whether they'll pay it, who have to give this money just to be allowed to do their jobs. Right. And so that's what we're challenging in these lawsuits.
Now, it's fascinating to me because at some level, trade unions, public unions, private unions, can make the argument that there is some benefit to all membership by belonging, that some of the fees are used ostensibly, using the coalition air quotes here, in the case of a strike or to market to the people their concerns, to support a variety of efforts, their the workplace concerns, the day-to-day workplace concerns of their union members. In the case of a bar association, and as we like to joke here, I'm certainly not an expert, I just play one on the radio. In the case of the bar, my understanding of the bar association's primary objectives were A, the ongoing continuing education and certification, if you will, of people who want to practice law before the courts of an individual jurisdiction, and occasionally, very occasionally, well, let's just say rarely, the policing of said bar members. There may be some, small benefits to association, but by and large, there's no connection whatsoever with the bar, if you will, to any of these other, I'll call them extraneous issues. So with that in mind, and the fact that they are obviously lawyers and they obviously are familiar with case precedent, what is their objection, or what are they hanging on to in fighting your case?
Well, they're supposed to only use mandatory dues for things related to regulating lawyers and improving the quality of legal services in their state. And so they will try to justify these things by saying, well, this does relate to regulating lawyers, making them more ethical, making people believe in the legal system. They'll in that North Dakota case, for the example, they said, well, if this ballot measure passes, we think that would burden the courts more. And if the courts are burdened more, then our courts might get a worse reputation. And so, of course, being lawyers, they'll come up with an argument to try to justify anything they might do. But of course, if you can justify the kind of stuff they're doing with ballot measures and so on, you can justify anything. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court previously said that they're supposed to limit it to activities germane to regulating lawyers and improving the quality of legal services in the state. But that's pretty much impossible to police. And in any event, in the Janus decision, the court made clear that under the First Amendment, the government can't make people support an organization unless it satisfies a very high level of scrutiny where the government shows that what it's doing is essential to, or that serves a compelling governmental interest, and that there's no other way the government could serve that interest without, that wouldn't violate people's First Amendment rights as much.
Right.
But we know that the government could regulate lawyers without forcing them to join or pay a bar association because there are 19 states that already do that. So there's just no excuse for that, and especially after the Janus decision, the courts shouldn't let it stand.
And again, that's why the irony of being understanding legal precedent. And your points are on target because essentially certifying the staggering implications of Janus, which is why particularly the left of center political firmament was so upset by Janus. I mean, you're talking about running into the 2020 election process, a knife, if you will, an explosive device to the underpinnings of multiple national campaigns. This money was considered just found money for Democratic candidates, both on a federal and on a major regional and a gubernatorial basis. I mean, this was just kind of a slush fund, really, for lack of a better term. I mean, I'm not aware of any state labor unions, and I'm not aware of too many bar associations throwing their hat in with small government. You could probably correct me on that, but it doesn't seem to be a national trend.
No, I haven't heard of that either. Of course, these groups are very involved in politics. They weren't, as far as I know, using member fees to actually give money to candidate campaigns. The law is pretty clear that they couldn't do that, and as far as I know, they generally respected that. But nonetheless, they would use these force fees to advocate on a wide variety of issues and indirectly certainly support and oppose candidates through their messaging, and that definitely gave the unions an unfair advantage in achieving their policy goals and their electoral goals, and now they don't have that anymore because Janus took it away. Now, how much of an impact that will actually have on elections and policy, I don't know. So far, unions are reporting that they're actually doing a pretty good job in retaining and signing up members because Janus actually has forced them to step up their recruitment efforts and make the case for union membership. And so far, they seem to be, in a lot of places, having some success with that. They said before the decision that it was going to be devastating, and this was an effort to destroy unions, and they wouldn't be able to do anything anymore. That the sky hasn't fallen to them in the way they predicted. But what we do know is that they don't, at least whatever they're doing, they don't have the unfair advantage they used to have in doing it, and that's the important thing.
Right, and to your point, I mean, first off, this listening audience is very comfortable with the issues surrounding super PACs, dark money, and influencers. There are many ways that you can influence an election without ever having to stroke a check directly to a candidate. And on the second issue, perhaps unions are being drawn back to their roots. I happen to be a fan of private labor unions, when they don't have this unfair coercive advantage, because they do, and this goes back to their early days of labor unions, there is a potential for them to actually just be nothing more than a market gathering force for their individual members, the rights of which they're entitled to in a free market, just like any other, whether it be capital formation or raw material development or technological development. They have the right to organize and gain market share. What is unfair, however, is anyone being coerced and having market forces and governmental forces used against them to force them to belong to that organization. Let's talk to it, and this is the genius, if you will, of organizations like Goldwater. The process of actually making this lawsuit happen. For too many folks, and I'm painting with a broad brush here, ordinary civilians who aren't as keyed into the daily operation of an organization like yours, this bringing a case is by no means a simple or inexpensive measure, is it? I mean, this isn't, Judy, let's do a show, we're talking about, are we?
Well, no, it's not as simple as that. You've got to find, the hardest thing really is to find plaintiffs, to find
Right.
people who not only object to what the government's doing, but are willing to put their names in a lawsuit and be sort of the figurehead of the case and the issue. And so we were very lucky in the Janus case to have Mark Janus as our plaintiff, somebody who was willing to actually put his name on this and who found out after the intermediate appellate court ruled in our case that he was not just going to be a plaintiff when we went to the Supreme Court, but the only plaintiff, because the others, for various reasons, weren't going to be in it anymore. And that meant that his face was going to be in the news. His name is going to be the one that the unions were smearing in their material and their media statements. And fortunately, he just had the character to stick with it. And that's really the biggest challenge, finding people who not only care about the issue, but are willing to put their name out there and see it through. Right. And then once you have that, you've got to make your case to the courts. And of course, that's a challenge too. But yeah, it takes a lot of, and then it takes a lot of time. These cases typically take years to make their way through the courts.
Right, and you have to speak, particularly in the case of Mr. Janus, or even now in today's case, there is an element of bravery involved in this. I mean, you particularly Mr. Janus, he became essentially the poster child, public enemy number one, for a significant part of the American labor movement, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. I mean, this is, you're setting yourself up, and on top of that, you have to find people who are actually injured, if you will, by the set of circumstances. What's the legal standard for that? Finding someone who's actually been, if you will, a true victim, as well as having standing.
You mean like, how do you identify the person who actually is injured in a way that would give them the right to sue and the right to challenge that law?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, you just have to be a person who's affected by the law directly, as he was, by being forced to give part of every paycheck to this union that he didn't want to pay, and being subject to that law on an ongoing basis, somebody who was employed by the state.
Right. So, and if you don't mind, generically speaking, because I'm not looking to pry into individual case details, is there a ballpark expense with litigating this type of case to the extreme it may go to?
Well, that's hard to say. It can vary. The time that the lawyers put in can vary a lot from case to case. It depends on a lot of things. But we're fortunate at the Goldwater Institute to have donors who support our work and make it possible to fund our staff of attorneys who can find and bring and litigate these cases.
How portable is a case like this in terms of precedent? Is Goldwater and/or the variety of liberty and legal groups that support this looking to roll out, if you will, this precedent nationwide? Are they looking to target now individual organizations or professional organizations that still don't, get it?
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of groups across the country that are making sure that unions adhere to the Janus decision. You have some unions in various places across the country that are telling people who say, well, now that I don't have to pay the union at all, I don't want to be a member, I want to resign immediately and stop paying. And they're being told, well, no, actually, under our agreement, you're locked in, till next year or whatever. Mm-hmm. There are groups, the Liberty Justice Center is one, the National Right to Work Organization is another, that are making sure that groups abide by this. There are also groups bringing actions to get back money that was wrongfully taken from people over the years through these mandatory fees. So there's a variety of stuff going on to actually make sure the Janus decision is respected. And then you have our lawsuits in several states trying to extend the Janus ruling to these bar associations. And the public sector unions and the bar associations are the major examples of this sort of forced subsidy to groups for political advocacy. If we succeed in both of those, we'll have addressed a lot of the problem.
Right. Is there actually a real opportunity for redress to folks who have been forced to pay these dues? And I'm curious, and I know this may be out of place with this conversation. Is there a standard that one would have to apply, retroactively to having objected to be a member to go after damages? I mean, potentially that number could be staggering. I guess the difficulty is proving who was ultimately damaged. But how do you approach an issue like that?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how the courts handle it. So far, courts that have considered this issue, lower courts, have not given people their money back. As to who would be entitled to it, you would think that at least people who were not union members who were forced to pay would be entitled to get their money back, because they said they didn't want to be a member. They had no desire to pay dues to the union and just paid what they were forced to pay. So all those people, at a minimum, should get their money back. And you're right that the amounts involved would be huge. There are class actions that have been filed all across the country, and any one of those could result in, at least $100 million in damages against whatever union is the defendant. So it's a large amount of money at stake. And some people say, well, isn't it unfair to make the unions give back this money when the Supreme Court precedent at the time, before Janus, said that they could take it? But you have to ask, well, what's more fair, letting them keep money to which they were never entitled because it was unconstitutional, or letting these people who shouldn't have been forced to pay have it?
Right. And it's been clear to everyone all along, and I'm sure there's a time where maybe this deviated. Maybe it was in the 40s or 50s, where as political and particularly national campaigns, and I think of the great books about the making of the presidency in 1960 on forward, when presidential campaigns truly became national, cent-a-million-dollar efforts, if now they're billion-dollar efforts. At that point in time, the quid pro quo, the clout versus the funding available, and it's not just that. I mean, it's the notion of, and I'll give you a quick anecdote. I know we've only got a couple minutes left, but I'll give you a quick anecdote. A few years back, myself and other libertarians were protesting public subsidies for a baseball stadium, and we ultimately won. By the way, we were actually one of the few that defeated the minor league affiliate of the AAA affiliate of the Boston Red Sox. Drove them out of state, as a matter of fact. So it can be done. I can remember being the fly on the wall, because I'm not that recognizable or important person, standing surrounded by local IBEW workers. And to me, one of the darkest comments that I heard that day weren't outright physical threats, but listening to someone who was clearly a shop steward utter the immortal words, and I'm paraphrasing, we know who's here today, we know who's not, we know who will get work, and we know who won't. And it's that type of exigent threat that hangs over everyone in the workplace if they don't allow themselves to be coerced to support an organization they simply don't believe in, or just simply wish to, quite frankly, make their own choice. And so for everyone who thinks, perhaps that these folks are complaining or whining, think about a comment like that. We know who's here, we know who's not, we know who will work, and we know who won't. And that to me is a dagger to the independence, the fundamental civil rights of the American worker, whether they be quite frankly, an ASME worker working the front lines at a kitchen or a public facility, or whether they be paid the highest, a $500 hour civil rights attorney working for his own small firm. Freedom is never based on economics. It's based on fundamental rights and fundamental birthrights. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that here in America, since we've strayed so far away from the recognition that so many of those fundamental rights are given to you at birth. They're not granted to you by a piece of paper. They're not granted to you by laws. You simply retain those rights simply by existing. And again, that's why I continue to applaud the work that you've done. What is the next step in this litigation? Where does it stand right now, and where is it going? What do you have to do next?
Well, of our several cases on the bar associations, The one that's furthest along is the one out of North Dakota, which actually went to the Supreme Court after the Janus decision. We had lost that in the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, and then we went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court sent it back down to the Eighth Circuit and said, reconsider your decision in light of Janus. So we'll be arguing in front of that court in June, asking them to say that now, in light of Janus, North Dakota's mandatory bar violates the First Amendment, and then if the court rules against us, we'll go back to we'll try to take it back to the Supreme Court, and I'm sure if the court rules against the Bar Association, it'll try to take it to the Supreme Court. Now, who knows whether the court will take it, but it seems the court would think that this is an important issue in light of Janus, and so we're optimistic that at some point in the relatively near future, the Supreme Court will declare that states can't make attorneys join or subsidize a bar association just to be allowed to practice law.
Interesting. And if I might ask, what did the local superior what did they hang their hat on? Was it, in terms of upholding the current law post Janus? I mean, what?
Well, it's a variety of things. One thing they cited, there is the Supreme Court decision that says that that you can have mandatory bar dues to pay for certain regulatory activities, and so then they take that and then they just say that really everything they do is okay under that. So they rely a lot on that, and they say that Janus didn't explicitly overrule that precedent. So really, what we do here is allowed under precedent until the Supreme Court explicitly overrules that. I think that's wrong, but I think it would be good for the Supreme Court to take this issue up and make that abundantly clear. And I suspect that will become necessary out of one of these cases, if not the North Dakota one.
Right, and I guess this is a final question. I want to give you a moment to, promote Goldwater and how folks can support it. But I guess this is an altogether different challenge than if you will, the threatening the almost stereotypical union thuggish-like response. In this case, you've got some state Supreme Court justices at the state level who have been, who've been appointed politically. You've got federal courts at the state level that have been politically. This is what's amazing to me. These folks are all members of, I would imagine, of their bar association. So overcoming the political culture, overcoming the, I don't want to say old boy network, but overcoming the fact that you're essentially being asked to judge against the hometown team. I mean, you go out to dinner, you go to meetings, you play golf with some of the people that you're about to, take a shot at. Has that been a challenge at all, overcoming those type of, for lack of a better term, incestual influences?
Well, it's hard to know. You just have to go in assuming that judges are going to be objective and fair and rule based on the law and not based on any personal, past associations they may have or whatever. That's all you can do is go in and assume the best and argue it the best you can. And it's really all I can say about that part of it.
I hear you, and I understand. Tell folks how they can find, and follow this case, and where they can find Goldwater, and critically important, particularly if you're a libertarian or you believe in civil liberties and civil rights, organizations like Goldwater are really the front lines for the defense of all of that. If you believe in smaller government, it's no longer good enough to just hope that someone else contributes. It's no longer acceptable to leave the hard work up to other people. Folks at any level can get involved in some manner, and the easiest way, quite frankly, is for folks, to write a check. So the next time you read or follow something on Fox News or on CNN and you're outraged and you feel impotent and you feel threatened, you can't challenge it, you're clearly of a mind that you want to be involved, the simplest way to do it is to look at an organization like Goldwater and support them, because they are doing the heavy lifting. So where can folks follow this case with regard to your activities in it, and how can folks support the Goldwater Institute?
Well, you can learn about this case and all of our cases at goldwaterinstitute.org. If you'd like to make a donation, you can also do that there. And then you can also follow our cases and our writing about various issues at our blog, which is at indefenseofliberty.blog.
Excellent, excellent. And so, first of all, Attorney Jacob Hubert, he is of the Goldwater Institute. I want to thank you for coming on, particularly on a Friday night, and just giving us a primer in both Janus and now moving forward to how this impacts bar associations. And it's compelling stuff, and I applaud your effort. I applaud your successes, and we're behind you. We hope you nothing but continued success in this effort.
Thank you.
All right, look forward to having you on again. Attorney Jewett of the Goldwater Institute joining us on a Friday night. We're going to take a quick break right now. We're running with a little bit of a mixed-up schedule today, but joining me in just a minute or two are the fine folks from the CBD Center of Rhode Island. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Center, and deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. You know all the social media stuff, so we're going to take a quick break, get them on stage here, and we'll be right back. And we are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The Naked City, the city of 1,000 stories, joining me in studio for the very first time, what I hope is many times, is both Chris Morgan and Matt Resnick. They are the co-founders of the CBD Center of Rhode Island. Now, folks who have followed the show or followed our politics here know that we are overtly, if you will, in favor of complete legalization of cannabis. They will know that we are diehard supporters of the medical cannabis program here in the state, and have testified a number of times in favor of said, and that we are grateful now that at some level hemp products are being incorporated into the day-to-day life of everyday Rhode Islanders. Today, however, is not a day for the political, and we'll leave that for other nights. What I hope we would accomplish tonight in the brief time that we have together is what I'll call CBD 101. There is a significant amount of misinformation, urban legends, myths, reefer madness, all surrounding what I believe to be the vanguard of the most, I'm not trying to go crazy on the rhetoric here, but I believe the single most important product introduction, family of products, product introduction in recent American consumer history. And what I mean by that is there's lifestyle products, which we're going to be focusing on in the coming weeks. There are medicinal products in the term of topical and pain resolution approaches. Literally, there are, coming from hemp, everything from all of the above to consumer products, which can be manufactured using hemp. So we're at the vanguard, ironically, of a revolution that was sort of abandoned in the 19th century in certain ways, yet at the same time using modern technology, testing, manufacturing techniques, when it comes to pain relief and just really a variety of products that can improve the life of virtually everyone in the state, we're in a brave new world. So I'm grateful they joined us tonight for the first time. And let's start out, first of all, introduce each other, if you will, or introduce yourselves, and just give us kind of a background of how you got started in the business.
Yeah, well, first off, Pat, thanks for having us on tonight. We certainly appreciate that. My name's Matt Resnick. This is Chris Morgan. We are the founders of Rhode Island's first CBD-only retail store. We're in Johnston, Rhode Island, right on Hartford Avenue. We certainly hope a lot of our listeners come to visit us. As far as how we got into CBD, we have been kind of going at our CBD research for quite some time, and with the enactment of the Farm Bill, stores like ours were now allowed to kind of come out from the closet and, be out there in the general public. When we initially started looking into things, we decided that CBD is something that we saw a large benefit in from friends, family, people around us using on a regular basis. And we decided that we wanted to bring more of that to Rhode Islanders.
And the important thing is, this is not only is it your primary focus, it's your only focus. I mean, we see stores everywhere. I see bodegas, I see gasoline stations, I see now a couple of the major, Johnny-come-lately, we oppose it for our entire life, major pharmaceutical chains who wanted nothing to do with it until they realized it was a profit. Did I say that out loud? Who are all of a sudden, everybody's CBD now. And that's why I wanted to have you guys on, because this is your complete existence. Your entire focus is on this line. So let's start from really the basics. If you're a child of the 60s like me, you're all too familiar, being a veteran of approximately 70 concerts of a certain tribal rock band that emanated in the Bay Area in the 1960s. Hypothetically, you may have come into contact with THC-based products. Hypothetically.
Absolutely.
First of all, let's define the difference between recreational weed and CBD. Just give folks an overview on that. It's one of those questions, by the way. Some of the questions I'm going to ask you are startlingly simple, but these are the type of questions that a lot of people, particularly as you get into my age bracket, quite frankly, are afraid to ask because they don't want to seem silly or out of date.
Absolutely.
So let it rip.
Well, we're here to help you and help them out, and being on the vanguard of this revolution here. We think we're the right folks to be doing so. The big difference between marijuana and hemp is that marijuana, its scientific name, cannabis indica, typically has about 25% THC and about 3% or less of CBD, where the hemp plant, Cannabis sativa L, typically has anywhere from 15 to 25% CBD, less than 0.03% THC.
So the critical first step is there is absolutely no narcotic value whatsoever in a CBD product.
Absolutely no narcotic value as far as something that's going to have a psychoactive or intoxicating effect to somebody. If you're viewing a narcotic as far as the way you term narcotic to have some level of potential pain relief for some ailments and things like that. If that's what you're viewing as a narcotic, then I wouldn't necessarily, clone that way.
Right.
These products here are more of the medicinal side of things versus a lot of the THC side of things is more on the psychoactive side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very focused on the medicinal and what that, powerful compound can bring.
Right. And one of the tragedies, if you will, of cannabis that we associate with the THC, which we associate with the psychoactive the presence of that on a high-level federal classification list has really stunted, in a lot of folks' minds, the ability to use CBD because of market confusion.
Market confusion and a stigma more than anything that really needs to be released. This is not a product from the marijuana plant that we're utilizing. However, the big misconception is that CBD is different in a marijuana plant versus a hemp plant. Mm-hmm. It is the same CBD, the same way that different, fruits, for instance, you can get the same vitamin C out of an orange and an apple. Right. You can get the same CBD out of the hemp plant and the marijuana plant. It's just much more prevalent within the hemp plant. Now, as far as the different things that we've seen, and I think this is a real big topic, when we were starting this, we were relying on some of our network that utilized these products and what they utilized them for, testimonial. Mm-hmm. We read about a lot of things, which is great. Found a lot of knowledge, absorbed a lot of things, heard how these products were helping people. Until we opened on March 8th, these last 4 weeks or so, the people that have come in our store on a daily basis, that not only have been using these products for a long period of time, the testimonial usage as far as the things that these products are doing, that everything we read, everything we saw, it was only the tip of the iceberg. These products are helping people with their ease of everyday living, every single day locally, whether people believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. And so the ability of these products to contribute, in many cases, it's almost instantly. It's literally break glass and see it. In some cases, the ability of people to function on a day-to-day basis has been materially impacted almost within moments, if you will. I'm trying not to exaggerate here, but you really see some miracle changes in the quality of people's individual lives with these products. The tragedy being that they were suppressed, if you will, for whatever reason for so long. So give us some examples. And I know one of the ancillary challenges to this in a brave new market is people's concern about not just efficacy, the efficiency of the product, its ability, its actual uses, but they're also worried about safety. And I know you have a number of programs in-house. You're not contracting out because there's all sorts of, in certain respects, the CBD business and the legalized recreational business, there's an element of the Wild West to it. There's a lot of people popping up, they're coming in and out of business. You folks have taken a much longer term approach to that, both in the safety and the quality of the product. So tell us about some of the products and then some of the things that you're doing in terms of testing that can help give the customer a really good feeling about purchasing from you.
So one of the biggest things, and I'll let Chris kind of go a little bit deeper into this, is when we started looking into products, we got a lot of products in. We wanted to find the best of the best CBD products out there. We saw a lot of good response with the people that were trying these products locally. We then reviewed all of the certificates of analysis. Each manufacturer or producer of the product supplies you with a certificate of analysis that says what your CBD levels are, or at least what they're supposed to be, we should say.
Right.
We then aligned and started trying to find some things locally that we could separate these products. And one of the things we did is we have a couple really good labs locally. And we started testing these products on our own to make sure that all of the manufacturers were putting the same things on the label, actually getting into the bottles. And we found things from little to no CBD to THC levels that essentially should not be given to certain people and could have a potential psychoactive or intoxicating effect. Chris, through all of this, kind of came up with a little slogan that has become a little bit of our mantra, which is a consume with confidence, which is a huge thing. And Chris can touch on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I tell you, it is important because we're ingesting this stuff, we're putting it in our body. We've got to make sure it's good. We're doing it for healthy reasons. For me, speaking from personal experience, this fight, this CBD going legal because of its efficacy with seizures I have a 4-year-old daughter who's epileptic, and you know, it hits home, and nobody knows how powerful, you know, CBD can be until somebody close to them is affected by that.
Right.
People that had the stigma, the reefer madness. I'm here to tell you, we see people every day, walking examples. And also, you know what, the aging demographics. I have 2 grandparents in nursing home. One has early onset of dementia, and the other is Parkinson's. CBD was patented by the government in 2003 for being a very strong neuroprotective, antioxidant, and anti-inflammatory. And you know, it's a damn shame that since 1937 this plant was put down, because look at the lapse of time, clinical studies, medical trials that could have went on and been performed. And we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg right now, and I'm excited to be a part of it. I know Matt is too, and we're looking to be the trusted choice in Rhode Island for CBD and CBD products.
And you illustrate some very important points. You know, it should go without saying that products you ingest into your body, particularly not just on a topical level, but you should be deeply concerned where you buy it. I'm just going to say this, please, with organizations like this in the state, do not buy salves at gas stations, okay? You know, you buy gasoline at gas stations. You buy diesel fuel at gas stations. You buy Mountain Dew late at night at gas stations, okay? That's the only thing you should ever buy at gas stations.
You can end up with snake oil at gas stations.
Really, and stay away from the roller grill too. But that's another you know, unless it's a speedy, they're pretty good. But you know, ultimately, this is really the free. I'm a libertarian. I believe in free markets, and I believe that the markets themselves will do as good or better job than the government, if you will, of providing the certification, the documentation necessary to prove to the consumer that you're marketing a quality product. You folks, you know, this is your life. This is your business. This is your name is attached to it. You're working aggressively to promote this across the media landscape in Rhode Island, which I applaud, because you know there's a whole other level of frustration at another show what's going on with recreational. It's great to see that we've got a local source, so that local vendors, local companies are not going to fall behind like they are on recreational here in the CBD frontier. That's outstanding, because as Rhode Islanders, we need to support local businesses. As frustrated as we are with some of the other aspects of the political landscape here, we need to support local businesses. Bringing this expertise at home so that you're not just talking to an employee of a chain store is critical. Now, let's talk about products. What are, and I know we could probably spend hours going over products, because literally, in products that are CBD based are being, and I'm trying to get someone on the phone who's in this business, are involved now in some of the most intimate personal products imaginable.
Oh my goodness, you're 100% accurate with that.
It's everywhere. But what are yours? First of all, are you doing any of your own manufacturing, or are you spending most of your time sourcing locally from quality manufacturers that you are in fact testing?
So currently we're not manufacturing or producing anything. As far as what we've done is we've aligned with what we consider the best network of both locally and national vendors who you know, are selling consumable hemp-derived CBD products. And our methodology behind kind of vetting them, by making sure we're keeping them honest with their testing methods, we've found a group of vendors out there that are consistent, and we know what we're getting, which, like you mentioned, is the Wild West, and a lot of the rest of the Wild West does not have that, unfortunately.
Right.
Now, as far as the different products that are out there, it's anything you could possibly have in a regular product. They have a CBD product for everything from, people normally take CBD by means of an oil or a tincture.
Right.
That's general. Everybody knows about those.
Well, let's take that for a moment, though. What's the difference between an oil and a tincture? You're addressing a group of people who are probably, like I said, very intimidated. It's sort of, for a lot of us, I'll draw an analogy here. It's like going into there's a couple of really nice wine stores on the east side.
Yeah.
And you go in there, and I happen to be a wine enthusiast.
Awesome.
So I'm comfortable. But the average person goes into a wine store and does this. And they're afraid, so many people are afraid to be is seen as ignorant on a product that's so hot as this.
That's
So what's the difference between a tincture and an oil?
That's why so in our store, number one, they don't have to know anything about CBD to come in. We have a staff that is trained beyond their years within these products and can educate people from a never one-time CBD user to an everyday CBD user, and is going to bring them through our product line, or our showcase as we call it, and identify which products can be most helpful based upon what they're looking for and what their past experiences are. Now, as far as the differences between oils and tinctures, I'd rather start with kind of what's CBD, so to an extent.
Right.
CBD or cannabidiol is the non-psychoactive, non-intoxicating compound that's found both within marijuana and hemp. Chris did a great job telling the percentage differences, essentially that hemp carries super high CBD with low to no THC. Marijuana is the opposite. Again, we talked about the same CBD. Now, what that CBD does when introduced to your body is the CBD helps stimulate the activity within your ECS, or your endocannabinoid system, which is a recently founded system that goes throughout your body. Not to get too complex on this system, but the most common, easy way to explain it is if a car is running low on oil and you add more oil to this car, the car as a system is going to run more properly and run better. Your ECS, or your endocannabinoid system, is running low on CBD. By introducing this additional CBD into your system, it will help stimulate that system and function at a lot higher capacity.
Is any level of CBD produced by the body natively, or is it this has to be really introduced, to the body?
It has to be introduced to have any true impact. There is not enough CBD within anybody's body naturally to stimulate these receptors and have these receptors firing on all cylinders. I'm going to bring them through our product case.
Yeah, so we have a lot of great products. We're bringing a lot of artisanal type craft products that we're picking throughout New England and the country that we deem to be the best products. For example, a local provider of full spectrum oil that we have out of Rochester, Massachusetts, right by Wareham. Them boys turn the cranberry bogs into hemp fields.
Excellent.
They're going to be growing about 15,000 hemp plants this year. We're excited. They're on the ground floor just like us, and everybody's looking up. We want to be a part of this great industry. Another company, Healing Rose, makes some great topicals. Get a lot of excellent reviews from everybody that walks through the door that uses them. They're another local company, artisanal, making the salves, chapsticks.
What are those salves?
Massage oils. The salves are great. They can be anywhere from like a daily moisturizer to great for skin issues, psoriasis, eczema. Matt has some psoriasis that he's been using, the Healing Rose, and it's been working great for him. Westfield, Massachusetts, another local company. I think it's another thing to note that when working with a lot of these farms and sourcing products, is that we're looking to utilize single source farms. Another one, Medterra, they're a big farm, one of the largest single source farms in America, out of Kentucky. Single source meaning they grow it, they extract it, we buy it, we have our own independent testing, and then it hits our shelves.
So this has got not only the potential as an economic boom in terms of getting folks away from some of the big pharma products towards individual relief of a variety of illnesses, but you've got an opportunity here in southeastern New England where the cranberry business is in significant trouble, where we're looking to retain some type of farm life balance here in our economy, to have a cash crop that can be used locally instantly, for which there is significant demand for.
It's absolutely huge.
So it's, and this is all as a result of the federal legalization of hemp, right? Not the kind of, my comments, not theirs, that crazy half-ass attempt at legalizing hemp where you had to pay $25,000 or $100,000 or $10 million or whatever it was for a license, right? So this is the feds finally coming down and saying, all right, you can grow hemp.
You got it.
Yep, it's
got
legal. We're going to have a national pilot program setting off this year in Rhode Island. We're excited. We're meeting farmers. I know a lot of farmers that are going into it. Everybody's waiting for the rules and regulations to get finalized and sorted out. I'm sure once those things get sorted out, we're going to have a great economy here. Maybe even an industry.
It's funny. I'm looking at my front lawn saying, I'm not getting out of it. I don't need no damn grass.
You need a different kind of grass.
And that's still a ways coming. But I'll be one of those houses that are going to turn over everything. So let's give a couple of real world instances. My wife was in an automobile accident in her early 20s. She's had consistent wrenching and back pain, and there's nothing surgical they can do. It's just you meet people. There's two types of people in the world: those with back pain and those without. And a lot of it has to do with just some inability to realign neural responses, things like that. Is there something for people in that situation that they could use?
Oof. Yeah, that's a great question. I have a cousin of mine that's been in a bunch of accidents, and he tells me he can feel every single one.
Right.
And as the years go on, those tend to hurt a lot more, weather-related in New England.
Yep.
Some turn to arthritic conditions as well.
Yep.
I feel that, Matt, do you want to?
A lot of pain that people are suffering from different injuries, whether it's accident-related, sports-related, whatever it is,
Right.
the main root of it is more likely than not caused by some internal inflammation.
Right.
This is one of the strongest natural anti-inflammatory compounds out there. By ingesting this product, whether it's sublingually, you're attacking that inflammation from the inside out a lot more powerfully than holding an ice pack on the top layer of your skin for some reason,
Right.
and things like that. So can it help with those things? Absolutely. Is this going to fix the underlying issue and say
Right.
she's bouncing out of bed, dunking a basketball or something like that? Probably not. However, can this help her with everyday, living and ease of living? That is something that we've seen a lot of people have success with.
Right, and that's a critical point here, because ultimately, if you're taking over-the-counter medication, and some of the aspirin replacements, when taken consistently over time, can result in severe internal issues, liver damage in particular. All right, if you can find alternatives to that, no one is expecting this to be a cure for rheumatoid arthritis. No one's expecting it to be a cure for repetitive motion injuries. But at the same time, what we've got here is a natural product that is a replacement for the mass-produced chemicals that we're ingesting into our bodies all the time.
Even if it's cutting down on somebody's pills, whether it's opiate use or something as low as a Tylenol or an Aleve that they take daily,
Right.
if it cuts them down from 3 Aleve to 1, that should be a win.
Exactly, exactly, and it's and again, there's so many other issues that you're not dealing with. It's less upsetting on a gastroenterological basis. It's again, there's so many benefits from this, and the legalization of it is only going to promote more because of our ability to finally research it.
And the other huge thing as well, above and beyond that research as well, is we can't forget our pets. These products are widely used on pets, whether it's
Really?
dogs, cats.
Well, give us a couple examples, because we know how people are about their.
So any issue that we can have, as much as we may not necessarily hear your pet vocalize this,
Right.
your pet can have as well. There's pets with anxiety. There's pets with chronic pain. There's pets with insomnia. My pet's running around all night.
Right.
These products here, and granted, it's scaled based upon size of these animals. They're not taking a human-sized dosage of anything or anything
Right.
like that. But everything from pet treats to infusing an oil or a tincture within the pet's food
Right.
are different ways for them to ingest it. And the pet response that we've seen from the people that keep coming back to us has been a lot faster than a human response.
Right.
So we've had a great result in pets.
Now, if you could, some other terms that are thrown around, and feel free to jump in here.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
we're going to go in.
Back to those pets, I wanted to mention a lot
sure.
of feedback that I've gotten personally lately has been separation anxiety. People are leaving for the day. Good old Charlie boy staying home. And people monitor their house with these Cox systems and everything. They monitor their dogs. They watch their pets during the day on their iPhone and everything. And the feedback we're getting is that it's helping a lot with separation anxiety too for the pets.
This is
The feedback we get is across the board. It just helps regulate our system as well as pets.
Even the topicals, the pets have skin issues the same way we do.
Yep.
right, and that's and it's so rough to see a pet suffer like that, and yet the cost of pet medicine, if you will. Wow, if it's nutty for us, it's even, What is a medible?
A medible. So a medible is, essentially, I think that's more on the
Right, but I want to distinguish.
medicinal marijuana side of things. However, are there CBD edibles out there? There definitely are. Everything from, your traditional candies as far as gummies, candy bars, bubble gum, beverages to, honey products. We have a great honey product that we have seen such a response in a lot of, true endurance athletes are taking it sublingually, and they're having an unbelievable response as far as recovery after workouts.
So you can infuse this honey product into your tea, into whatever recovery beverage.
Tea, coffee, or you can just take it sublingually under your tongue, and it's not going to necessarily have the same bite as a, plant full spectrum tincture.
Right.
And that's the most efficient form of administration is sublingual under the tongue. Put the oil or honey under your tongue for 30 to 45 seconds and wash it down with your favorite beverage. And that's the best way to get in our system. Edibles is probably the slowest, or the medibles. They go through your system. It takes a while to pass. A certain percentage of the product goes to waste. So if we want to be efficient in administering CBD into our bodies, it'd be sublingual under the tongue.
Okay. All right. So literally, there's no special techniques in the administration of it. Literally, everyone in their home can do something as part of their morning routine.
Yeah, you can vape this product should you decide to smoke. That's a little bit of on the other side of things from what we are. We do have those products. However, vaping is an immediate onset virtually. However, it's also the fastest thing to leave your system. Right. So a lot of people supplement with those things, but in our opinion, having a base amount to get that higher dosage of CBD in your system and keep it at a constant is best utilized by means of an oil or a tincture.
Right, and without any of the potential harmful effects of smoking.
Correct.
And or vaping.
Correct.
I mean, what you're talking about is really just a replacement or an addition to your multivitamin in the morning.
Should be taken very similar to that. These products should be taken daily. These products should be taken around the same time every day, very similar to a prescription or a multivitamin. Your body's smart. It starts to look for these things around the same time, especially the system that they process. So it's definitely something that should be used very similar to that on a daily usage.
How did you guys were you folks using the product and just saw the potential, or what was your? I'm always intrigued. I've owned businesses. I've worked in privately held businesses. I believe there's two types of people in the world: those who have to make payroll and those who don't. Running a business is a complicated proposition here in New England. What was your motivation? What did you just discover the product, or were you? In your case, you said it was part of your family.
Yeah, I think that's the strongest kind of motivator to it all, as well as just seeing a lot of people around us utilize the products. Yes, I certainly do utilize the product. Chris does as well. However, seeing something so close to home and hearing all the things about CBD before we really knew a ton about it, how this drug with epilepsy is going to be passed through the FDA. It's going to be the first CBD-related drug, which finally went through, obviously. Having, something so close to home with any type of epileptic issues, it really hit home.
So the shopping experience, if you will, at the CBD Center. And first of all, let's jump in for a second. Where's your location again? Tell folks how they can find you.
So we're at 1239 Hartford Avenue, Johnston, Rhode Island. We are there Monday to Friday from 9:30 to 6:30. Saturday, being tomorrow, come visit us from 10 to 6, and then Sunday from 11 to 3. We also have a new fun thing called our Text Club, which if you text 411-669 and you text CBDRI to 411-669, you will join our text club where we can send out some offers, keep you up to date with what's going on at the CBD Center of RI, promotional items, as well as just informational stuff about CBD.
What are, and I know this has been a sensitive issue in the rec and the medical market. What forms of payment do you accept?
We accept all forms of payment currently.
Okay, and that's an important distinction because folks who are on a budget who want to use a credit card, they can come by. Yep. That's a challenge with regard to some of the wilder elements of the industry because of, well, federal issues. Right. You are beyond that now. You are a legal product for whom legal manufacture can start to take place very shortly on a local organic level, at a high level. So, folks, there's really nothing none of the elements, and I want to stress that. Think of this as you know, I'm old enough to remember in the 70s when the first health food stores opened up. You know, and there was kind of a, you know, for folks my age now, they're that kind of cynical look, like, what's this all about? And yet people who jumped in early found profound changes and improvements in their life.
I'm sure.
This is I'll think of you guys as the first CBD health store here in Rhode Island, where folks, without any legal implication, and I'm stressing that because, like I said, of the confusion in the market regarding the product, can have safely sourced product that can almost instantly provide potential remedial aspects to the day-to-day conditions you face in a legal tested environment using in a legal conventional retail environment. There's really, we're past all of it now. It's a brave new era.
We don't have to convince people. People hear CBD everywhere. You turn on the Today Show, you turn everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere you hear CBD. We don't have to convince people that the wave is coming. We just need to let people know that we have the best board.
Right.
Everybody wants to be on our board with this wave. We are doing things that other people are not, and I'm not bad-mouthing our competition.
Right.
We are just taking these additional steps because if we're letting anybody take these products off our shelves, we want to be comfortable knowing that we are perfectly fine inducing them. Our friends, family, children, whoever it is can induce them as well.
Okay, and a typical shopping experience, particularly as a first-timer.
Yes.
You walk into the CBD Center of Rhode Island, you're a first-timer, you could be of any age, any background whatsoever. You're going to approach a desk, and folks there, you can explain to folks what ails you, right? I mean, is it as simple as that?
You're just going to walk through the door. You're going to get greeted with probably a handshake and a smile. It's going to be welcoming. If there's a line or a wait, you can just grab a deli ticket. We have those set up. We have very comfortable seats. We have information playing on our menu boards. But when you walk up, you're just going to find somebody that's all about you. It's about your experience. We want to provide a great experience. And what is ailing you? Why are you coming to the CBD, and how can we help you out? And everybody's different. So we let our clients or patients or wherever we're going to call them moving forward dictate, you know, the path that we're going to go down and how we can help them. And there's so many different forms of consumption. Everybody uses it a little bit differently for, you know, different ailments. So we'll walk them through what CBD is. We're going to let everybody know that the government's had a patent on that since 2003, and, you know, 19 years later or 16 years later, everybody's finding out about it. It's mainstream. Coca-Cola's jumping in it, you know, beverage companies left and right, alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And we'll be looking to work with some local vendors and providers of those companies as well. But you're going to find everything you need to know about CBD. There's no dumb questions. Ask anything and everything. We want you to be informed, educated, so you know you can consume with confidence. And we'll take as much time as that takes with any individual person on a one-on-one consultation. And we've had great response with it.
Excellent, excellent. Folks, if you just joined us, I've got Matt Resnick and Chris Morgan. They are the co-founders of the CBD Center of Rhode Island. The website's actually that simple. It's cbdcenterofri.com. They talked about their text club. By the way, this hour, and I have a feeling I have to introduce you to each other because I've got to believe there's a root beer CBD infused yacht club beverage in our future.
It's very possible.
Very possible.
It's very possible. I have tried those yacht club beverages. They are delicious. So adding a little extra health component might help us a little. You know?
Rhode Islanders, working with Rhode Islanders, there's nothing better than that.
Oh my goodness! And I have to give out every hour. We're blessed to have sponsors here. I have to give a shout out to Yacht Club Bottling. They're up and kicking for the new summer coming up. I'm going to tease you. There is a new flavor on the works that's going to be released in just a few weeks, just in time for summer. Listen, folks, Yacht Club Soda, Rhode Island's boutique soda before you even knew you needed a boutique soda. 100 years before the hipsters, as I like to say. All natural ingredients, real cane sugar as opposed to that fructose madness, clear local water, served up in ice cold in a glass, the way soda was meant to be. If you're of a certain age, you'll remember this tastes like the soda that I drank when I was growing up. They've got dozens and dozens of flavors. My favorite, of course, is root beer. I'm a Sacrilege, I know. I'm not a beer guy. I'm a root beer guy. But just wonderful stuff, folks. We're coming upon one of the holiest times of the year. Depending on your faith tradition, whether it be an Easter or Passover, whatever that special supper you're preparing for your family, you're going to spend a lot of time and probably a fair amount of money. So don't serve the refinery plastic jug O soda with it. You've got the very best soda on the planet right here in Rhode Island, from a ginger beer and a ginger ale. They've got great mixers which are being used by craft bartenders all over the state of Rhode Island. And of course, some of my favorites, root beer, sarsaparilla, and one of the newer flavors, which is an orange cream. So yachtclubbottlingworks.com, available at their Centerdale store, as well as retailers all over New England. They're one of our sponsors. So now I feel like it's a personal mission. I have to make sure you guys meet John. And I'm here to be your test case, okay? You can just feed me induced root beers all day long and just lock me in the back, and
I like it.
I'll be fine.
You'll be awake.
Absolutely. Listen, I want to thank you guys so much for coming in. I'd love to have you bring products online from time to time, and just for so many of us for so long have pressed for this moment.
Yeah.
And we're just proud as hell that someone in Rhode Island is in a position to be on the cutting edge of it, and we certainly wish you nothing but the best. And I know that we've steered away from the political this time. Maybe not so much next time. I know that I'll just throw this out there. My comment, not my guess, but there are attempts to levy some. Here we go, Rhode Island. We got a great product to levy some taxes on it, and I would ask you to reach out to your individual state legislature. If you don't know who they are, reach out to me, and I'll reach out to them, and they'll wish you'd called. But we don't need to take Rhode Island companies, whether they be Yacht Club or now the CBD Center of Rhode Island, and make products more expensive for Rhode Islanders. I'll just leave it at that. Let's give a product line like this an opportunity to take hold in the community so people can recognize its benefits, and then we'll sit down and we'll figure out something later on.
Nice.
So I thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
All
Hopefully
right.
you can stop by the store and come see us shortly.
I'm gonna do the old Facebook Live from your store. Just I think that would be fun if I sit with one of your folks and they can lead me through it, or my wife through it, and do just kind of a Facebook Live so people can see exactly what the experience is like. And let's any things. From what I hear, things are going great guns.
Things are going great. We've been very well received from the medical field to the locals in our area to people throughout the state. It's been great. We are again 1239 Hartford Avenue, CBD Center of RI. Come on down and visit us. You do not need a medical marijuana card to get in our doors.
Thank you. Critical point.
And anything and everything CBD, we're there. Whether you've used CBD or not, come on down. We can talk it through, and it may be a fit for you. It may not, but we're going to identify it specific to you.
And I don't think there's clearly any harm in trying something. If folks are suffering, they need to at least avail themselves of every opportunity. There are different products in your line which will help different people at different times, at different steps in whatever medical process or journey they're going through. But listen, I think we all understand at this point that the news is filled with headlines about people dealing with pain management. And pain management is so many people are only a car crash away from a lifetime of chronic pain and or substance abuse issues that come with it. So let's all give this a shot, and let's see how we can improve each other's lives.
Awesome.
And you know what? I'm going to extend an offer tomorrow to all the GoLocal Prov listeners. Come in tomorrow. See me. I'll be there. Matt will be there. 10 to 6. Mention GoLocalProv.com. Get 10% off your purchase tomorrow.
There you go. I'll put that out to the listeners.
Awesome. We like it.
All right.
Thank you
Gentlemen,
very much.
congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Any other... Cumberland, nice place to open up a location.
All right.
Okay.
We'll have to get up there.
We're just saying.
All
We're
right.
going to take a quick break right now for a few minutes. Folks, you are listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcasting Center. 90 Way Boston Street, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. CoalitionRadio.us, where you'll find links to our YouTube channel and also to our podcast efforts. Folks, stay tuned, and we're going to be back in a few minutes. We're going to be doing some libertarian stuff as well as some other interesting economic news. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon. And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Joining me on the line, kind of a surprise guest, but our first two segments were a little off kilter in terms of timing. And yes, that is the joy of independent media. Thinking that at any moment this show is going to be a strictly broadcast, maturely run, highly defined broadcast, never gonna happen. So joining me on the line is my good friend and someone that I'm proud to work with politically, is Alan Gibberti. Every Rhode Islander at this point is aware of his activity. He is a true patriot. He is amongst the leading edge, sometimes the bleeding edge, of protecting your Second Amendment rights. Now, he's chairman of the Rhode Island Log Cabin Republicans, but first and foremost, has been a forthright speaker for civil rights in the LGBTQ plus community. Alan, welcome back to the Coalition.
Oh, thank you, Pat, for having me. And I have to say that, yes, live broadcasts never, that's the joys of being live on the radio, is that nothing happens and you got to be on your toes.
I know I did it to you once. First of all, you can see Alan, or I should say listen to Alan on WBOB. Well, how is that? Is it, it's not, I have it all hardwired into my system. So give me the website and give me the times that you're on.
It is Mondays and Tuesdays at 7 o'clock. It's Rhode Island Red Radio on 990WBOB.com.
Right. And one of the hardest working guys in Rhode Island independent media, he too, we run into each other routinely at some of the seediest spots in Rhode Island. And of course, I'm talking about the various conference rooms up at Mordor, aka Halitosis Hall. Listen, Allen's Avenue's got nothing on what goes on in some of those rooms up there. That's all I'm saying. Now, you've been up there a couple of late nights, and before you go, we'll let people know where you can find you on the web and they can see your testimony. But this time around, this has been a particularly contentious set of hearings. I think it's fair to say. We're on the rebound from losing red flag last year. The quaint notion that if something is held for further study means we won't have to deal with it until next year is no longer in force. Despite the quote-unquote victory of these rules being held for further study, I think we all know that the folks in the yellow shirts have got to be up there at the State House all the time because, fair statement,
absolutely.
Yeah, if you've ever seen the movie Fatal Attraction, I want you to think Glenn Close at the end of the movie coming out of the tub. It's just, it's any moment that these folks, and quite frankly, let's be cynical. They're waiting for moments of weakness. They're waiting for ways to incorporate this. And I think one of the most dangerous methods they seem to be employing is trying to work these things into the budget as opposed to freestanding legislation. But what's your take on these different rules, and what do you find particularly offensive? And give me a flavor of your experiences at the hearings this year.
Well, I mean, I think the hearings this year, I think we see. I mean, definitely we had the first one this year a couple of weeks ago. We had over 3,500. We had around the same numbers this time. So I think the people in the 2A community, and not even just the 2A community, anybody who pretty much supports the Constitution, because a lot of these bills, things that I find offensive. One of the bills is, you have to properly store your firearms. What does that mean? Kind of still up for debate, but if you have a neighbor who turns around and someone says, I don't think he's storing his guns properly, well, the police show up, they search your house, that's what, the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, there's other things, it's not just the Second Amendment, and I think the crowds the people are starting to understand that more.
Right. Now, and it's each one of these amendments, each one of these rights, not only are they natural born, but they're also interrelated. People worry about the First Amendment all the time. Quite frankly, it's my contention that the attacks on the Fourth and Second Amendment will happen, and continue, I should say, to happen first, leaving the First Amendment thoroughly exposed. So folks need to react accordingly. Now, the theme this year, obviously, on everyone's mind, is the two tragedies. Folks, in terms of the LGBT community, continue to look back to what happened at the Pulse nightclub, which is thoroughly understandable. You had I refuse to call it a tragedy. You had murder on mass proportions take place.
Yep, absolutely.
Simultaneously, of course, Marjorie Stoneman was on everyone's mind. And I'm going to say two things, and I want your reaction. Then I'm going to hush up and listen to you. I was on later than you. I followed a lovely young person who was very, very emotional. She self-described as a Jewish queer. And I will not challenge for a moment her right, her need to both weep and pray for the folks killed at that synagogue in Pittsburgh, for the folks who were assassinated in cold blood in Orlando. But my response to her is take your time to recognize, to pray, to exhibit the emotion and the respect necessary for the dead. And then it's time to arm yourself. I don't have the moral standing to say to someone who comes from a Judaic background to tell them what to do. I simply don't. But I can't help but fail to understand why, given this 100 plus generational, multi-century history of violence, a high level of violence directed at people because they are Jewish and because they are a member of the LGBTQ plus community, that at a certain point one wouldn't want to simply arm themselves. And if they don't feel comfortable doing that, that is their choice, but allowing other members of their community to arm themselves on behalf of them. Why? Explain to me, why is this? I understand emotionally it's a challenge, but on a moral and simply a common sense level, Alan, speak to me. Why is this considered controversial in the year 2019?
I honestly don't know. We're going to kind of put it at that. I was there when this person testified, and I heard her testimony. And one of the things that she had said was she was quoting one of the victims who was texting his mother. He was hiding in the bathroom when this had happened. He sent, I believe, his first text about this happening at 2:05, and he sent his last text to his mother at 2:51. That's over a half an hour before help arrived. Right. I think looking at that, saying you are waiting for somebody to come and save you, and as people say, until help arrives, you are the help.
Right.
And I find it unacceptable that, what some members, I think, of the LGBT community, or the narrative that's being pushed on them is that we're constantly victims, and we're adults. We do not. We're not victims, and we don't need to make everywhere that we go a gun-free zone because we know what happens in a gun-free zone.
Right. People die.
Yeah. So I don't. I think it's more of on the left, a narrative as guns are bad. And we just need to get rid of them. If they weren't here, this wouldn't have happened. Well, that's completely wrong. If somebody was allowed to be armed, and they were in there, this would have ended much sooner, and with a lot less lives lost.
Right. And moving on to Marjorie Stone, what I tried to point out in a non-inflammatory manner, if you will, for lack of a better term, was that trusting the government to save your life will get you killed. Marjorie Stoneman, to me, is proof positive that a governmental intervention and reliance approach is just prone to failure. Number one, despite all the laws enabling them, despite all their structure and components and expense spent, you had someone who was clearly on a crash course to disaster allowed to remain in the system. And then, when they did attack, since the good guy, and if you're unfamiliar with that concept, the good guy is the very often concealed carry holder, who happens to be in the immediate surroundings. Sometimes they're law enforcement, sometimes they're not. The good guy is the guy who takes out or at least intervenes and slows down the progress of the mass killer. And very often we've had circumstances, as is the case of Marjorie Stoneman, where there was a good guy present, but because it was a gun-free zone, that good guy, who was thoroughly trained and a first responder, was unarmed. So, as I pointed out, I love your reaction to this, ultimately the responsibilities for the deaths at Marjorie Stoneman lie with one person and one person only, and that was the active shooter. I will never name these people. I will never, even in my tiny little show here, I will never give them that projected glory. But but there is clear culpability with the government, as we say as libertarians, in failing to provide an environment where other people were able to respond, because the behavior of the on-site only armed forces was cowardly and abhorrent. What should have happened at Marjorie Stoneman?
What should have happened is what Florida is now doing with their schools, and allowing their teachers, the ones who wish to carry, to carry, and have armed personnel, police officers, resource officers, whatever you wish to call them, at the schools. Now, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission, the ones who studied the shooting, came up with that determination, is that, yes, we need to keep our schools safe, and the best way to do that is with armed teachers or resource officers, police officers, again, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. And you have, the Raimondo administration, aside from the fact that not even speaking to anybody in the two-way community, completely disregarded everything that was presented in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas report from the commission. And they also disregarded, I had spoken to Andrew Pollack and Hunter Pollack. Andrew Pollack, he is now on the Florida School Board, was appointed there by the governor. He lost his daughter Meadow in the shooting. They had offered, when I spoke to them, it's on the air, it's on tape. They offered to come up here and work with the Raimondo administration to create the same type of bipartisan bill to keep our schools and our children safe. Nothing from the Raimondo administration. Nothing. She just went on and she did her own thing.
Right.
So Rhode Island has basically implemented the same procedures that have been shown to not work. So what they think the outcome is going to be, I have no idea. But we basically left our children defenseless.
Right. Which brings me to my next contention that I testified for, and then I want to focus, because I know you had some First Amendment related experiences testifying yourself over the last year.
Yeah.
I called out, not that they'll listen or care, but I called out the Raimondo administration for creating a climate of fear for very young children on two fronts: on climate change and on gun control. Intelligent adults can have differences and continue to work on them in a public forum responsibly. But to continually work to create a climate of fear for political expediency, as is the behavior du jour of the Raimondo administration, is despicable. Mm-hmm. To listen to gun control advocates almost brag about their children coming home weeping, wondering if they'll be killed that day, when in fact it is such a statistical anomaly, not one to be dismissed, not one to be ignored, and one that should be addressed, but still such a highly statistical probability, to me, is criminal. We have turned our children into emotional basket cases as they wait for the world to melt before us. And by the way, when it was my children's age, it was the world to freeze. But the world to melt before us, while simultaneously we are attacked by hordes of angry assassins at their school. It's just,
yeah, and I don't understand it.
Political gain, purely. Political expediency,
yeah,
political gain at the expense of our children.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every generation has whatever that nightmare is. I mean, some of us grew up, wondering if we were going to, be the survivors of a nuclear holocaust.
Right.
And that was a very real threat.
Yes.
But it wasn't drilled into our head that any day now you're going to die constantly by adults, which is what's happening now. And then they complain that their child is suffering from, and they have said in the testimony, PTSD. We're watering that down too, but PTSD from all these threats of mass shootings.
And at the General Assembly, the State House hearings, at the first set of hearings, I listened to an adult who was a teacher claim, who works in a school that was never under attack as far as I'm concerned, claim that she locks herself in her supply closet to do her prep work out of fear for being attacked. I listened to someone explain that. And again, I will never dismiss out of hand, nor will I make sport of someone's fears. But at a certain point, if that person is responsible for working with our children, then I've got a real problem, because there are emotional issues at work there that need to be resolved. Not taking shots at her personally.
Absolutely.
But that's just something that has to be confronted. And I listened to the level of misinformation, and it's brutal. I listened to Town Councilor Kat Kerwin, I believe her name is, talk about how the children that she's responsible for and working with in after-school programs at the high school level are no longer willing to do it. And I wanted to say, because they've grown up and realized that your ideas are fraudulent. You know, that there's absolutely no science or merit to any of your ideas whatsoever. You know,
right, and they are the party that embraces science, only when it's convenient, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, I was there when she testified, and my biggest problem with it, and again, you know, if somebody wants to be emotional, that's your right. But this is a teacher who sat there and said, they want every single teacher to carry a gun. We're not qualified. Not everybody's qualified to carry a gun. I don't want to carry a gun. My problem is when you have a teacher, an educator, and somebody who is supposed to know what's going on and relaying these things, clearly either has the wrong facts and hasn't bothered to check them out, or is blatantly lying. It's one of the two.
Mm-hmm. Or both.
I mean, because, yeah, or both, because what's going on, like in Florida right now, the teachers who do carry, I mean, it's voluntary, it's strictly voluntary, nobody is forced to. They go through background checks, psychological evaluations, and they go through tons and tons of hours of training with the police on what to do in an active shooter situation. It's out there. This isn't like a big secret of what their plan is, but yet they still pull this. They want to arm every teacher, and not everybody should be armed. So that's what I have a problem with, is the spreading of misinformation by an educator.
Right. Well, and then again, look at a certain former legislator, Linda Finn, continues to conflate information about concealed carry permit holders and their level of violent crime. And even though the numbers she reflects are infinitesimally small, she still has to conflate suicides and other issues that have nothing to do with violent crime into her numbers for them to even represent as measurable. You know, and it's just, I'm heartened because what I saw there, and I love your reaction to this, in both the House and the Senate Judiciary, were people who, you know, while there are a few people, Kool-Aid drinkers there, most of the folks there were clearly not persuaded. You know,
yes, I agree with you.
And in fact, for Representative Mattiello, or Mr. Speaker, to openly state that a few weeks before that with regard to tax issues, that he was not going to tax a natural right and a constitutional right, I believe his exact words, is heartening.
Yeah.
But vigilance, deals are made. In the halls of justice, justice is in the halls, isn't it?
Yes, it is, absolutely. Which is why, you know, we need to be there not only when they're presenting these bills, but, you know, when the time comes when they suspend the rules, and at any point, anything, like we need, like last year, we need to be there constantly, around the clock, from open to close, just so they know that we're there, that we're watching.
Right. I mean, I was up there a few times for unrelated hearings, and you'd see people like Jen Moffitt and the entire crew, 3 or 4 of them sitting up, catching up on homework or knitting or stuff like that, but ever vigilant. I mean, the civilian patriotism that was exhibited over the last couple of weeks by ordinary Rhode Islanders who are not part of the process. I mean, you and I are in the bubble, as I call it. You know, we're, you know, we try to get out and they pull us back in, right? You know, but
yes,
what's in my experience in the last year or two, and getting much closer to this issue, is number one, the value of both lifestyle, educational, rights-based activities that are promoted by local hunt and gun clubs is completely underreported and quite frankly staggering. The amount of work that they do on behalf of the community at every single level is astonishing. I'm in awe of what these people have done, in some cases over 3 and 4 generations, in promoting gun safety, in promoting after-school activities, and promoting charitable activities for the community. That's the first thing. I mean, I stand in awe of these people. It's part of their lifestyle. They don't simply give lip service to it. When the time comes, they are ready to act.
Yeah, I have never, and I'm very close with the 2A community, but I mean, one of the things that struck me right off the bat is like the unity and just basically they're willing to go out and to help the community without question and without thanks, and just to do it and leave. And I've never seen a group so cohesive in helping its own community.
Right. Now you had your own adventures, as you often do. And folks who are just joining us, Alan Gilberti is here. He can be found on WBOB 990 online, and we'll give him ample opportunity to promote his efforts. And also is the chairperson, if you will, of the Rhode Island Log Cabin Association, a Republican organization that works closely with the LGBTQ+ community, and has become synonymous with civil rights and the Second Amendment as it applies to all citizens, but also in support, often to great personal expense, for the LGBT+ community. This hour, by the way, is sponsored by Daryl Gould, our good friend at Air Sciences, airsciences.net, your source for mold remediation, fighting biohazards, making your home clean, your business clean, your school, your environment safe from any one of a number of biohazards for your entire family. airsciences.net, they've been with us for a couple years, whether it be Beacon Shipping and Logistics in our next hour, Air Sciences Now, or of course, Yacht Club Bottling. We thank them for their continued support of independent media. We've managed in this first few segments of the show to literally touch upon, I believe, Alan, every single controversial subject known to man. We've pretty much hit them all. So as you know, having local support for your media efforts on issues, I call them third rail issues like this, are critical. We can't exist without these folks. We simply can't. So, Alan, we've only got about 5 minutes, but I want you to talk about some of the challenges that you've run into in this round of hearings. What has transpired so far?
As far as the challenges with advocating for 2A and LGBT rights,
or First Amendment?
Oh, with the First Amendment. Well, my first testimony, and I'm not really quite sure. I don't want to say, but so everybody gets up, they get to speak, they get roughly 3 minutes. That was later in the night. Earlier in the night, everybody could kind of go on for much longer. My turn. I got up to speak, and I had a prepared statement because that's the best way to get your points across, is to have everything written down. It was down to 3 minutes. I timed it. I do this regularly, where I time segments and how long they're going to be. So it's not like something I had ever done before. I sat down. You had my piece of paper there, and Chairman Craven just looked at me and said, "Don't read that. You can't read that." And I looked at him and I said, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, you're already infringing on my Second Amendment rights. Please don't infringe on my first. And he fought me and did not want me to read my prepared statement. He said, I don't want to cut you off. That whole exchange probably took almost a minute. So I lost a minute off of my time. I didn't even get to finish. So I don't even know what was up with that.
I'm frustrated. I get that these folks are here a long time. Something similar happened to me in regard to the stadium hearings, in which I told the then finance chair that I wish I'd been smart enough to quote Ronnie Reagan at that point, that I paid for that seat. But I've got that one. Keep that one in the back of your holster, if you will. But when I look at the amount of time that's given to the Raimondoistas, you like that, Raimondoistas? When I look at the amount of time that's given to the professional lobbyists, the notion that individual citizens who pay for the joint are limited to 2 or 3 minutes, and that may be their only exposure whatsoever to the process, their only involvement in the process. Because we all know for a lot of us, in my case, my state representative is useless. He's a nice enough fella, local business person, local farm owner, no beef with him personally per se, but I'll never get a single one of my ideas even considered. He'll give lip service to it, but there's nothing going on there. If it doesn't happen to conform to what Speaker Mattiello wants, it's got no future. And I don't doubt that you run into that all the time as well. So
all the time.
Yeah. So the notion that we should be limited, I'm not saying we should be given 20 minutes, but there's a big difference between a minute or two, particularly since folks like yourself have spent hours preparing and then hours waiting to share articulate, well thought out presentations. And regardless if they've been repeated before or not, you've earned that right as a taxpaying Rhode Islander to give your, I don't care if it's word for word what somebody said 10 minutes ago. Damn it, it's your right to say it.
Just absolutely. But I mean, I didn't even quite get it. Like, he didn't even know it was on my paper. I mean, other people were just like, he was just trying to shut you down. Like, I don't know what was in it. Yes, it was late. But I'm sorry, that's not my fault. And the only reason it's late and that I'm here is because they called us there. So, you know, you made your bed, lie in it, and now listen to the rest of us.
Right. So. Right. Now that's frustrating, and I've had a pretty good experience with him. So that's surprising. I find the House Judiciary and the Senate Judiciary members, by and large, at least largely respectful. House Finance and Senate Finance, we'll just let that one hang out there. Most of your Senate Finance Committee hearings aren't even taped. Think about that.
Yes.
Well, Alan, I short time tonight, but we're going to get you in again soon, and I thank you for coming in. Give folks a way and how to listen to Alan Gibberti and your radio show.
Yeah, I am on, so Mondays and Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock on 990WBOB.com. It's Rhode Island Red Radio, 7 to 8, both Mondays and Tuesdays. You listen to my show. Actually, this week I have Abby Johnson from Unplanned. The movie is based on her memoir. She is going to be with me. And you can also find me on social media, Facebook, Twitter at GibbertiAllen.com, GIBERTIALLAN, at Gibberti Allen. And I also have an LGBT allies group that meets every third Sunday at a range for a shootout.
Excellent. Excellent. And folks can find out about that on your social media.
On my Facebook page or on Twitter.
Excellent. Well, you are a patriot. I thank you for your attention to your time, folks. Listen to Alan's show. I believe it to be appointment listening. Support independent media. There are a variety of sources. I'm the guy who doesn't mind promoting the other guys when they're good.
Oh yeah. I will promote everyone else too.
Yeah, it's a small community. People like Tony Jones, people like Alan Gibberti, some self-absorbed narcissist named Pat Ford. We all work really, really hard. This is a labor of love to deliver a viewpoint, a perspective, and a bit of information that, quite frankly, conventional big-time media in this town, I'm excluding WPRO from that. I think they do yeoman's work. But if you look at the big TV stations, if you look at that, they're going to give stuff like this a minute. Now think about that tonight. Alan and I have been on for a short segment. We went over 20 minutes, and you and I, and another guest coming on, but you and I could talk for another hour and actually work on salient issues. You simply can't cover this stuff in soundbite radio, soundbite TV. It doesn't work.
No.
So
but also the other thing. Sorry, tomorrow at 2 o'clock I'll be on Changing Gears on WPRO. Now that you mentioned that.
All right. Great show, WPRO, AM 630. What time are you going to be on?
2 o'clock. Changing Gears.
2 o'clock at WPRO, AM 630. You can listen to this. So give Alan a shout out to that. They're set up to take calls. I don't know if you're going to be taking calls, but certainly give Alan a shout out to that. Alan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, buddy. Alan Gibberti, Rhode Island patriot, gun rights advocate, LGBT community advocate, also citizen journalist, broadcaster on AM 990 WBOB.com. Folks, we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to bring on Kara Schultz from the Libertarian Party nationally. And we are back. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We've already told a few tonight. We've talked about the Janus decision and how it's impacting litigation against law boards and lawyers organizations nationwide. We talked about CBD as an oncoming element in folks' ordinary lives as we saw the first significant opening of a CBD center here in the Ocean State in Rhode Island. In our last segment, Alan Ghiberti, chairman of the local log cabin Republicans, talked about the First Amendment and Second Amendment rights in particular as they apply to the LGBTQ plus community. Joining me now, though, is, as I take a moment here, one of the great things about having an indie media show is you get to talk to all the people you really like to talk to. And sometimes you might not get a chance to, either because people are busy, might be out of your reach, might be above your state, whatever. You get a chance to have conversations with folks who really fulfill some astonishing roles in day-to-day life. And that's never been more true of who I'm talking to tonight. Kara Schultz is with us. She is with the Libertarian Party nationally. She's a political activist in the great state of Minnesota. She's also, incredibly enough, are you ready for this? She actually serves in public office. She does all of that. In the Libertarian Party nationally, she supports candidate issues, candidate rights, candidates, logistics. And so I wanted a chance to talk to her during sort of, and I'll say it's a lull, it's never really a lull, but a kind of a quiet period, if you will, in the run-up to the 2020 elections. We've had a couple of 2019 special elections, a few other things pop up. We've had some successes this week that we're going to talk about. Get a sense of her and how she came to be such an integral part of the libertarian liberty movement. And then I know she's got a special issue that she wants to talk about, and I believe it revolves around opioids, pain management, and things like that. So we've got about 50 minutes to talk, and we hope to cover it all. And I'm hoping this isn't the last time she'll join us. Kara, welcome to the coalition.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so this is, every Friday night we try to spend an hour with someone in the libertarian movement. And what I'm hoping to, in speaking with people like Elizabeth Brierly, is that Kara's going to be kind of, and she doesn't know this yet, but she's going to be on, I hope somewhat frequently, to sort of bookend some of the efforts that are going on with candidates nationally. Let's not kid ourselves. Getting libertarians elected is a challenge. We very often have to educate people as to exactly what a libertarian is. Sometimes we have to overcome urban legends, myth truths, sometimes outright lies perpetrated and perpetuated by our opposition. It's fair to say, Kara, that I don't think any of the duopoly is interested at any point, anytime, anywhere, any place, any shape or form in getting a libertarian elected. It's just not part of their quality day, is it?
No, it's a team sport, and we're not on their team, so.
And what's amazing is I've only been in the movement for a few years. It's amazing how just not part of the team we are. I mean, at this point, I think everybody hates us. We're fiscally conservative, but we really are, as opposed to budget busting Republicans. We actually truly believe in civil rights as opposed to pontificating Democrats. As I like to say, we supported marriage equality since 1970. Hell, we fought the war on drugs since there's been a war on drugs. I want to remind people that the war on drugs is funded in a truly bipartisan manner. Both Republicans and Democrats support the war on drugs, and we know what a failure that is. So we are the party of principle. So give us a little snapshot. How did you get involved with the libertarian movement?
So I was on the fringes of the libertarian movement probably starting 2008. And before that, I had an interest in politics, but it was a lighter interest in politics. One of the reasons being I had served in the military, and of course, while you can vote and you can have an opinion and that kind of stuff, they don't want you really active politics. Mm-hmm. So after that point, I started reading different libertarian philosophy. Also stumbled onto Ron Paul as well. met a few people who are libertarian and just started having more conversations with them. Then once Gary Johnson ran for president, and this was still when he was running on the GOP ticket, when he was trying to get on that ticket. And I heard him in interviews, and I was like, that's what I want to be a part of. And so I got interested in his campaign lightly, but once he made the jump to the Libertarian Party, I was all in. And I ended up chairing his campaign in Minnesota.
Interesting you say that, because that's exactly, I've told this story before. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I was driving along in a northern central Massachusetts town at about 11 o'clock, I believe, one night in the middle of winter. And I was listening to a show on radio called Nightside, which is a Boston-based talk show. You can hear it in about 35 states. And they were talking to some guy, and he was talking about personal liberty and freedom, real true freedom of choice, and individual rights and self-direction. And I'm listening to this guy like, who the hell is this guy? Where have you been all my life? And so I call the guy, and he's running for president, and I get on phone with him. And he goes, hey, my name's Gary Johnson. Yep. And I don't know. Kara, I think you and I can say this, and there's a whole bunch of people who are either listening or going to listen to this, most likely, who will probably say, I don't know if that was a good moment or a bad moment, but it was life-changing. So yep. I know, and I'm just going to say this carefully, I know there's a temptation. I am now a proud member of the Libertarian Radical Caucus. There are those who got frustrated with times with Gary Johnson. I will tell you that Gary Johnson delivered a message to a lot of people, and there's a lesson to be learned from this, to a lot of people who might not have otherwise heard. And he changed a lot of people's lives, and had real impact on the party. And things at times may not have gone as well as we want, but I will always have great personal affection and tremendous respect for the efforts of Gary Johnson, both as governor of New Mexico, as a candidate for the presidency in the Libertarian Party twice, and really any efforts he goes forward. I find him to be an individual of great integrity, and he was a tremendous public servant, as well as an entrepreneur, an adventurer, and I think in many ways exhibits some of the very best of America. And don't know how people will feel about that, but it's something I feel very strongly about. I felt the need to say that. So you came from a military background. Well, by the way, so many folks, I mean, the great vice chairman of the Libertarian Party of the state of Rhode Island is a military veteran. Why do you think the military is such a great ground, great way to meet future libertarians? What's unique about that experience?
Because many people who join the military are doing so because they want to actively defend civil rights. They want to actively defend our rights, as citizens in this country. And they feel so strongly about it that they are willing to sign up and join in the military with the understanding that they could be sent somewhere to fight in something they don't want to really fight in. And no one really wants to ever go to war. But people do that because they feel so strongly about it. And that's why I think military and military vets they're libertarians. Almost all of them are libertarians, whether they know it or not.
Right. And it's really our responsibility. In a few minutes, we'll get into some of the work you do. Mm-hmm. I will never get frustrated with a voter because I believe it's our responsibility to reach out to people and explain to them what a libertarian is. It is. The voters, there's a lot of folks in the movement who will get frustrated with voters because they voted for the Democrat, they voted for the Republican. They fill in the blanks. There's some pejorative connotation that they'll use. Sadly, for a lot of different reasons, folks have lost really track of understanding what their civil liberties are. They don't understand the Constitution the way they should. They don't understand the political process the way they should. They may have been raised in a home that's biased towards one of the duopoly. 1,000 different reasons. Isn't it our responsibility as libertarians to reach out to them and somehow grab a hold of their attention?
It is. And when people are articulating a problem that they have or a challenge that they're facing, and they're saying a specific issue, something's causing them pain in some way, if our response is to brush them off or to just say, oh, the market will decide, or any of those types of platitudes, we've done a disservice to them and also to spreading the message of liberty. Because what we need to do, whether we are candidates, activists, party members, whatever, what we need to do is address the problem that they are facing and give them a solution that is a libertarian solution, a specific solution to the challenge that they're facing. And we need to be able to articulate that. It doesn't always have to be a government solution, and oftentimes it will not be a government solution to their problem. But it does need to be a solution that solves the pain point they are experiencing.
And as a result, we need to incorporate people who may or may not meet the litmus test for being a full libertarian. It's a journey,
right.
Really, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
It's not everyone in our movement is a deist who believes in God. So I use this analogy to describe them as well as people who do it. Faith in a higher power is a journey one reaches. As a child, you're very often inculcated in a particular discipline, a religious background, whether it be Quaker, Lutheran, Catholic, Jewish. One reaches adulthood, and in the same manner that they reach their own religious conclusion, they have to find and follow their own political path. As I always joke, I'm probably one of the few people who'll meet who not only admit, but actually volunteered for Richard Nixon. Okay, so I was a member of CREEP, the Committee for the Re-election of the President, 1972. I was 11 years old. Yikes. So if I'd been shut off at that path, I would never have had the incredibly marginal impact I've had on the libertarian movement. But, post 9/11, I lost personal friends on 9/11. I spent a good deal of my life, ironically, I'd been outsourced out of a job, a year or two before, but I spent a great deal of my life working in and around the World Trade Center in New York. The company I worked for lost 300 people. I was prime neocon material, and I became a neocon. Hi, my name is Pat. I was a neocon. And so if I was dismissed out of hand at that point in time, I grew up. And if that sounds like a shot at neocons, guilty. I grew the hell up. I started to look around the world and understand that there were issues that were nuanced, that were not simply black and white, and not somehow, as the magical statement at the time was, turning fill in the blank into a sheet of glass was not the answer and not the solution. So, we all go through a journey, and we have to find a way to respect that of other people, because that's how we grow our movement. I'll point out historically the Shaker movement. Are you familiar with the Shaker movement?
I am.
All right. So if anyone might say, younger people might say, what's the Shaker movement? You don't know, because the Shaker movement didn't allow people to have children. The libertarians, we can't be like the Shaker movement. We have to have children. We have to spawn, procreate, whatever. But enough about my thoughts. You're actually involved in governing, aren't you?
I am.
Tell us about that. And so much of your work is campaign support. I think what gives you a lot of legitimacy is the fact that you're not only advising people, you've actually walked the walk, and you're simultaneously performing it. Tell us about your experience with that.
Sure. Okay. So in 2014, I ran for local office, and one of the reasons why I ran for local office was after the 2012 election, Gary Johnson was asking libertarians to run for local office, and he was making a concerted effort to ask people in 2013. He went around and said, please run for local office. We need libertarians to run for local office. And so a few of us in Minnesota did. Elizabeth Dahl did in Minnesota, Olga Parsons did, I did, a few others did. We ran for local office in 2014. Olga and Elizabeth were elected. Roger Paris was also elected to office. I got really close. I almost knocked off an incumbent. And I kept a record of everything I did, when I did it, how I could have done better, what I wish I had done, what I wasted time on. I kept very detailed notes because I knew I was going to run again in 2016. If I was that close, man, I was going to do it again. So the city that I live in is Burnsville, Minnesota, and it is a city of 61,000 people. And when you run for city council, it's at large. So you have to campaign the entire city. And we vote. I mean, we have a very high percentage of voters. In fact, our county in the last election had the highest voting percentage in the country. Wow. So we vote. So when you're campaigning for the entire city, you are definitely campaigning in the entire city. So in 2016, I ran again. At the same time, I was also chairing Governor Johnson's next run for president. And a few months prior to when I filed to run for office, I found out that I had stage 3 colon cancer. And, you know, that was a time when I had to pause and really think, you know, do I want to take on running for office while I'm quite realistically fighting for survival? And I decided, yeah, I did. I did want to do that. I also wanted to chair Garrett Johnson's campaign, and that's where I was going to put my energy. And so, yeah, when I campaigned, when I door knocked and I went full out, it was when I was doing chemotherapy. I was ill, but, you know, I did it every day. I mean, and I did it every day. I went out door knocking for hours every single day, because when you run for office and you want to win, when you want to win elected office, that's what you have to do. It's direct voter contact. And you either really want it or you don't. And there's nothing else in between. So if you're kind of wishy-washy on it, that's fine. Run as an informational candidate or run as a choice candidate. But if you put it out to people that you are running to win and you are accepting donations and you are having people volunteer to help you, then you get your ass out there and you knock every frickin' door. So I wasn't supposed to win for multiple reasons. I definitely wasn't the chosen candidate. The powers that be had picked who was going to have that seat. They had the money. They had the volunteers. They had all the connections. But I had the drive. And I also connected with voters on what their challenges were and met them where they were and worked on solutions to their challenges. So it was about connecting one-on-one with voters. And yeah, when election night rolled around and I won, many people were pretty stunned in my city.
Wow. Wow. To hang out there for a second. I'm sure they were. You got me on that one. So you're in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. You've done the door-to-door thing.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you're from New England, understand that we base Minnesota on a couple of things. Hubert Humphrey, the Twins,
Yeah.
the Vikings never winning a Super Bowl, and it snows. Actually, it does snow all year round, right?
You know, we might be getting snow this next week, so pretty much.
All right. You guys are, and the fact that you folks are incredibly polite, which if you're a Northeasterner is really troubling on a really base level. All right. You know, I've seen you at the convention. We've only met a couple times. I've seen you at the convention confronted with some really self-absorbed people. Yeah. about that. Sorry about that. But be incredibly polite, despite the fact that the person in front of you was acting like an idiot. So I'll just say that. I can't imagine who I'm talking about. Anyhow, but you talk about making a personal connection. You know, I'll go back to the Clinton campaign of all things. You know, it was, you know, the famous statement in the Clinton war room was, it was about the economy, stupid, because they recognized at that point in time, and somehow the Republicans completely missed it, that it was lunch pail politics in that presidential election. People were concerned with their own economic future. I don't doubt they did extensive polling, but they also opened their eyes to the polling. You know, folks do all sorts of sample research all the time, but still only see what they want to see or what they happen to be obsessed about, whatever the issue is. It could be 2A, it could be weed, it could be taxes, education. Talk about that. How you make it sound so simple. How does a candidate, particularly a grassroots individual from a somewhat unknown party to many, what are the ways that they can connect with a voter?
So connecting with a voter, number one, you have to treat them with respect. Mm-hmm. When you are knocking on their door, for instance, you've interrupted their evening. There is no one sitting at home going, you know what I really wish would happen tonight? Some frickin' politician or candidate to knock on my door. That just doesn't happen. So you have to be respectful in realizing that you are interrupting their evening, and yet they still decided to open the door and talk to you. So you need to have a level of respect on that. The other way that you connect with, potential voters is you ask them what they're concerned about. Because candidates can run their campaign one or two ways. You can either campaign on stuff you care about, and that's fine. If you want to be an issue candidate, you're pushing forward an issue, that's fine. Or you can campaign, solve the problems they care about. Successful candidates campaign on what their constituents care about. Mm-hmm. And we don't have the money to do polling. So unlike Republicans and Democrats, we can't do like issue polling and that type of thing, for the most part. You know, that gets into, $15,000, $30,000, $60,000. Right. What we can do, though, is you can do like a test door knock. You can spend 2 weeks very early in your campaign, even before you announce, when you're just exploring your run. And you can knock on doors around your area, spread it out. And just introduce yourself and say, I'm considering running for office. And in preparing for my run, I would like to know what challenge you think is the greatest one facing our city. Mm-hmm. What are you most concerned about? And then find out what that is and write it down. Pretty soon it's going to emerge very quickly what is top of mind on the people in your city. And then you're going to pick those top 2, top 3, top 4, whichever you're comfortable with, mm-hmm. and come up with what is your solution to each one of those challenges. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're going to run on, and that's how you connect with people. But always be very respectful. One thing that I did was when I door knocked and someone spoke with me, that evening I wrote them a thank you note. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me about issue X. I hope after you're able to research a little further that I can count on your support November 5th. And I did that every evening. Every evening I spent an hour to 2 hours writing my thank you notes, dropped them off in the mail in the morning. Mm-hmm.
Now, how many terms have you served now?
So I am still in my first term because it's 4 years. So I was elected in 2016. Okay. So I'm always up on a presidential year.
Yikes.
Right?
Any early word? How have you, well, this is actually a question, sadly, I don't get to ask of many libertarians. I know a couple guys in New Hampshire who did yeoman's work, and I know there's some other folks out there, but on a day-to-day basis, now you're in a city council, correct?
Yes.
Of by Rhode Island, a sizable city. This is no mere burg. You've got all the traditional issues facing a town of that size. You've got a school department. that's probably hopelessly out of control, that probably does everything they can to torment you. You've got OPED and public pension issues potentially. You've got all these things. What's it like to actually govern, or try to whatever degree, govern as a libertarian? And what were people's reactions to your libertarianness?
So when I joined City Council, both, City Council and city staff, they were all very gracious towards me. But they were also wondering, what the heck is going to happen? What is she going to do? Because sometimes there is a view of libertarians as they're going to get in there and they're just going to be all like, F the government, right?
Right.
And be very adversarial. And I know that whether it's in government or any type of working group, any group that you join, you get things done by forming relationships, building coalitions, and they can be on specific issues. Not every city councilor and the mayor is going to vote with me on every issue.
Right.
But I know all I need is 2 other votes. That's all I'm fishing for on every issue is 2 other votes. Can I get them to say yes? Can I get them to say no? That's my goal. So who are going to be those 2 votes? And I do have different people on council that vote with me on certain issues. I've been able to get quite a bit done because I've worked hard to earn their trust. They know when I say I am for or against something, I really do mean it. I'm not going to be bought off by anyone. There's no horse trading with me. It's just not going to happen. I don't trade votes. And so they know that my behavior is predictable and reliable, and they figured out where my ethical basis is.
Right.
So that's how you govern. You form relationships, and then you find your coalitions around very specific issues. I definitely do not win every vote by any means, but I've gotten a ridiculous amount done.
Give us some examples, because I mean, this is this is edge of your seat if you're a libertarian. You're just sitting here going, "Wow, she's elected. Wow, she's." give us some of your favorite moments, if you will.
Okay, so you can do small things, and they seem small, but they actually do matter in people's lives, but they also start to get the philosophy forward, such as in Burnsville, we eliminated pet licensing.
Wow.
You had to license your dogs and cats and all that kind of stuff. And, it seems like a really small thing, but how you do a small thing and how you do a large thing is the exact same way. And that is, you bring it forward as an item to discuss, and then you give the background information on it, on why that action should or shouldn't be taken. And so I had the information and I had these studies on why did pet licensing even start in the United States? What was the purpose of it? Does it serve a purpose now? And the answer was no, it really didn't serve a purpose now. The other issue was, are people complying with it? And the answer was no. People were not complying with it. So why would you have something that serves no purpose and your citizenry is not complying with? So we were able to just eliminate that. Now that's a small thing, but that sets the stage of trust and getting people to understand and getting yourself to understand what the process is on that. So now we're doing things like we have eliminated building height in our city. We had a cap on like 4 stories.
Wow.
Which really crushed development. And we're in a major metro area. Like, we're not a small town on the edges. We're a major metro area attached to the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So anytime you touch issues of zoning, man, that's, that gets into really hot button issues. But we looked at it and said, does this even make sense anymore? And, someone asked, well, what if someone wants to do a 20-story building? Well, that takes special materials once you build above a certain height, and that's actually very expensive. So if someone has that kind of money, they're going to do it right. You know, that's going to be an amazing, awesome thing. But probably that's not going to happen. Like just the cost of it is it's not going to happen, but it could. We're also going to be taking up, and we're looking at this. I don't have this through, but we're just going to start taking a look at this, consolidating all of our zoning for business, because you have all these categories of business zoning, right? And changing all of it to mixed use, which means it can be used for any type of business, and it can be residential too. It can really be anything. So now you have developers that don't have to come before you and ask for special permission to do X, Y, or Z because it's slightly coloring outside the lines. But it's consolidating your zoning so that it's not all of these really tiny, really rigid, segmented areas. So these are the types of things that you can start to really get into. And this is, truthfully, removing government. It is consolidating. It is getting to smaller government.
I mean, you could actually, let's take it one step further. You've removed government. You've consolidated government. You know, this is not some pie in the sky concept to you. What you've actually done, and I get it, because on one hand, incrementalism, if you're a libertarian, can be very frustrating. On the other hand, you have actually restored property rights to individuals, and you're using the successes of that and the lessons from that to continue to restore property rights to individuals. I mean, you look at licensing is such a huge issue for libertarians nationally, and it's one that speaks to economic equality, and one that we can market really across the nation. If we get away from all this crazy occupational licensing, and folks like 1889 and and Fee and Reason have done all sorts of studies of this. That's how we promote economic opportunity, well, for everyone. But it's a bogeyman. There's this fear, oh my God, what will happen? More licenses, right? So, this, you talk about Gary's point about local office. I had a conversation with a young man earlier this week, and he's ready to run for high office, and this points so aptly to the importance of town boards and city councils and board of educations. You will change more lives as a member of a town council. You will introduce liberty into more forms as a member of a town council than I would imagine many legislators can during their entire time serving, based on how very often legislatures are geared towards majority power by a single leader who is a member of the duopoly. You are the ultimate example of break glass, instant liberty. It's really that straightforward. And so Gary was right, and I think you see the movement nationally. Now I know you're your position, you're involved in candidate support, so by definition you're not political now. So I'm not going to ask you to be political per se, but clearly there is a trend being championed by many, including myself, to gear ourselves towards town boards, educational, because of just that. Now you have built, by doing this, you've accomplished things that even really can't be calculated. All of a sudden, there's a libertarian in office in a town in Minnesota, which is amongst the more liberal states in the nation.
Yes.
Again, Hubert Humphrey, National Public Radio, 2 words, Garrison Keillor. Okay. So all of a sudden, libertarian is not an abstract term on the Drudge Report or on some faraway, Capitol Hill website. Libertarian is not something you talked about. I always use a comparison. We also, in world cultures, we talked about political organizations and religious ones. We got a kick out of the Zoroastrians, and we made fun of the libertarians in 1978, okay? Because they were the ones who wanted to sell everything to everybody. You are, by getting elected to this and actually engaging in creating liberty, you have created an example in that area so that no one will look at a libertarian the same again. You've actually blazed a trail for other libertarians to run for elected office in your sort of world scope there in that part of Minnesota, and people will see them as not only a philosophy, but as a successful individual operating within the framework of government to create liberty. And that, as they say in the old MasterCard commercial, is priceless. You simply, we've had some successes in Rhode Island. You hear us talk about it all the time. It's still relatively recent. It's important to us, but we beat a stadium subsidy by a significant by the Boston Red Sox. Now we actually have Rhode Islanders now saying, because of that concerted effort, saying things like that company, government has no place interfering in private markets. I've heard regular people say that, and that's how you blaze a trail. That's the future of the party.
It is, and first you got to run, and then once you get elected, you have to govern. And when you're governing, you are under a bit of a microscope, because people really want to know, what does it mean when a libertarian governs? And in 2018, we had another libertarian run for office to join me on Burnsville City Council. And it was a tough race, but he's in. So now there's 2 of us on Burnsville City Council.
Oh my God. Next thing you know, there's going to be a revolution. People will be dancing in the streets.
Right?
That's outstanding. And that's, I think we need to do more to spread that success story, because again, that's if we've had a situation here in Rhode Island where it's shifted very hard to the left from a state that was already hard to the left. And the progressive movement in the state did exactly that. They first volunteered for boards. They moved up to the next level and got elected to some stuff. Now, all of a sudden, they are a major voting bloc in the state legislature. The challenge, of course, for them is, as a wise philosopher once said, rut-row, they actually have to govern. And
yeah, they do. Yeah. So now they have to show that their solutions work.
Right. And I think we know how that movie ends. And it doesn't usually end well. Now, first of all, if you're just joining us, and whether you're watching this in the future on our podcast or on our YouTube channel, Kara Schultz is joining us. She occupies a number of roles. She is an elected Libertarian City Council person in Minnesota. She works diligently in campaign and candidate support for the Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party. She's joining us. This hour, of course, is sponsored by Beacon Shipping and Logistics, beaconshippingandlogistics.com. Kara, you probably didn't know this, but there's a Rhode Island-based automobile shipper who ships nationally. So should you have a car that you want to go to a family member, a cherished family member, or if you buy, I'm thinking for you, Mustang convertible, you buy that Mustang. No, I'm serious. Black on black Mustang convertible. It's you, okay? If you want that Mustang convertible that you bought on eBay, Beacon Shipping and Logistics.com. They can ship it nationwide from dealers via eBay, Facebook Auto, you name it, insured. And they're willing, incredibly enough, Kara, you've got private organizations in the bluest state of America willing to support this show with their sponsorship. Takes a lot of gumption to do that, as they would say in the Midwest. Is that a good Midwest word, gumption? Takes a lot of gumption to do that. So want to thank them. Karen, you've got another issue that you wanted to talk about, correct? You wanted to talk about the opioid epidemic and pain management. Are you still?
Yes.
Okay. Give us, and you laid out some very personal details at the beginning of the show. You did suffer from an advanced stage of colon cancer. It did not get you down. People, I got to tell you, when you're a certain age, you're surrounded by people who've been very ill. You've lost some, you've won some. I don't know that I've ever met anyone brave and tough enough, maybe it was your military training, whatever, to actually run for and win a high elected office while suffering. That's astonishing. But tell me about your concerns and how you're looking to advance this issue.
Sure. Okay. So what we're seeing both federally and in states across the country is a movement to restrict pain medication.
Right. And
they are advancing a erroneous narrative. And the narrative is that and they'll call it the opioid crisis. You hear about the opioid crisis all the time. And really, it's a heroin and fentanyl crisis. It is street drugs. But they're advancing the narrative that it's caused by prescription drugs. And what happened was, you know, years ago, up until probably about like 2000, 2012, people who are advocating for people who suffer addictions to have proper treatment and to not be treated like garbage and thrown away. They were talking about how, you know, the heroin epidemic was really taking root. But the problem was most of America looked at that and went, yeah, they're human garbage, and I hope they overdose and die. Like, they deserve it. So they were getting nowhere with this whatsoever. And, you know, and addicts were suffering. And, you know, there was a lot of shame and stigma to it. But at about that time, they came up with a different narrative. And this one really captured people's attention and caused a lot of empathy and sympathy and caused people to look at addiction in a different way. And the narrative was, you could be going along, you get into a car accident, and you're in the hospital, and, you know, of course, they're treating your pain with, opioids, and before you know it, you're hooked. And it's through no fault of your own, you know, this was no moral quandary. You just all of a sudden realized you were hooked and you couldn't do anything about it, and we have to help these people. So people looked at that, and a lot of people said, you know, I had surgery and they gave me pain medication. My God, I could have been hooked. And so people really took that message in, and there was a lot more sympathy and a lot more willingness to help people facing addiction. And it's kind of sad that they had to go that route just to be decent human beings, right? Mm-hmm. The problem with that narrative is it is 99% bullshit. So when you look at people taking pain medication, if they're taking pain medication under the care of a doctor and they've been screened for a prior addiction, like they don't have a history of addiction, there is a 1% or less addiction rate. Wow. So it's not pain medication. But there's two things with that. They still want to help people with addiction. And also, pharmacy, you know, big pharma has deep pockets. And so you have states and the federal government looking to punish and get money from big pharma to fund other government programs, because drug dealers, really, it's hard to find them, you know, like they don't pay fines, right? And you can try to sue them, but they're probably not going to show up in court. So it has really gained steam in the last few years. The CDC in 2016 put out guidelines which were supposed to be voluntary. Mm-hmm. And it was on primary care doctors for prescribing pain medication. And it was just supposed to be some voluntary guidelines. What happened was those were grabbed onto as if they had this strength of law. Mm-hmm. And the DEA also grabbed onto them as well. So they didn't just apply it to primary care doctors. They were applying it to everyone. They were applying it even into oncology, orthopedic surgery, palliative care. And if you were prescribing more than 7 days worth of pain medication, that doctor was now considered an outlier. And the DEA started busting these doctors, making them perp walk. They were shutting them down. And this is continuing. And doing civil asset forfeiture on these doctors, taking their houses, their cars, taking their business, taking the patient records, which now the patients would have to individually petition to get a copy of their records so that they can be treated by another doctor. Right. And so doctors across the country just went, okay, I am not prescribing pain medication. Right. And so we are seeing a crisis happening. And we now see states that are taking the CDC guidelines and making them into law, making more monitoring programs, invading patient privacy, mm-hmm. interfering in the doctor-patient relationship. So we have suicides are climbing, which the CDC acknowledges that there's now an increase in suicides from this, because people are being left in unendurable agony they're just being dumped. We have doctors that are discharging patients from their service, not because the patient doesn't need to be seen, not because the patient doesn't need to be treated, but because the doctors are terrified that they're going to be busted by the DEA.
Here in Rhode Island, the first they established a prescription medical database. In this last legislative session, they managed to sneak through a provision now that you can do a warrantless search, incredibly enough, of the Rhode Island State Prescription Medical Database. It's precisely for these reasons. You know, I mean, folks, you know, we're fortunate here in Rhode Island. We have a very strong chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union who fights this incessantly, but there is still the attitude, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. And, and I cannot, well, you're right, the level of pain that individuals are in, particularly who had as a response to some severe cancers, highly disruptive surgeries, whether it be colonoscopies, or any one of a number of, you know, not just colon cancer, but Crohn's disease, things like that, where folks are just in agony. I mean, literally virtual agony, and are unable to, I mean, we're at this cross-section of American pain management where we have, at least here in the Northeast, we're taking successful medical cannabis programs and we're twisting them up and twisting them around to conform to government's both need to turn into a cash cow, incredibly enough, where because we still have classified cannabis as a narcotic, we can't do any original federal-based or hopefully market-based research into what the real benefits are. Right now it's anecdotal, so that we can find out once and for all what lies there, what opportunity lies there for a non-opioid pain prescription. And then, you're right, at the same time, we're denying people who have built up, at least on an anecdotal level, what I've seen situations where people have built up resistance, and then all of a sudden we're literally making them take half pills a day and cutting pills. And now what you've got, and this is confounding, well, it's not confounding to me. You know, I'm a libertarian. I've given up hope on the government. But you've got this government-induced artificial nightmare of epic proportions because you've got people who were on successful medical cannabis programs because of state interference are being pushed back into the streets to use dangerous wet medicine. The state still refuses to engage in any type of research or authorize or declassify or decertify, if you will, from none of this need be happening. There are people for whom, at this point in their lives or disease or their medical situations, only going to react positively to some opioid-based painkiller.
Yes. Yep.
It's just that.
Yep. Yeah, because there's different pain receptors also in different parts of your body, and anything happening in your abdomen in particular, opioids work really well on that type of pain, and other pain medications do not. So you have all these complexities, and I mean, the gold standard of medical care is supposed to be individualized care. You know, your doctor works with you to come up with an individual plan that works for you in your specific situation. And what we have is politicians saying, nope, I'm going to give one size all. I'm going to make these very arbitrary rules. And if any of you violate this rule, then, you know, we're going to try to jail the doctor. We're going to take their things. We're also going to make these databases where we put everyone on this list who's receiving pain medication, but we're not going to tell them that we've put them on this list, but we're going to start collecting data on them.
Right.
So there's all kinds of privacy violations. But yeah, when you look at the number one reason that people go on disability, for instance, it's unmanaged pain. And many people who were leading productive lives, they were able to take care of their children, they were able to work, they were able to find some enjoyment in their life. And at this point now, they are bedridden. They're prisoners in their own home. And there's a lot of shame because if people mention that they're in so much agony and they need their pain medication, people hear that and think that they're an addict. You need drugs? What's wrong with you? Can't you just gut it out? You know, so there's this really funky view that we have on it. So if you're seeing people that you used to see before out and about, and now you're just not seeing them anymore, this is probably what's going on in their life. Their life is a living hell. There's a reason why Human Rights Watch has opened a file on the United States for medical torture, and it relates to politicians interfering and refusing to allow doctors to treat pain.
Wow.
It's absolutely disgusting.
You know, we've just got literally a couple minutes left. This is an area I'd like. I was fortunate enough to at least be able to report on the. I was able to report on the Right to Try movement. Not that I was any sort of politically involved in supporting it, because, I was there. Started becoming aware of it towards the end, and that's the opposite end of the medical spectrum. For folks who haven't been associated with Right to Try, that's where you've got experimental medicines that there is now federal legislation in place finally that allows people to try them, when they are clearly past stage 4 and they're in the end game in opposing cancers. As a libertarian, it sounds almost to be heresy to talk about a federal solution to this, but until we create libertarian paradise, we have to work with an existing system. The Goldwater Institute, who actually ironically was on earlier in the show, did yeoman's work in the Right to Try. One of the things I'd like to explore with you in ongoing shows is exactly what can be done from that in terms of, I know that there's a couple of national organizations, and interestingly enough, because the state of Rhode Island has been screwing with the medical cannabis program, we were starting to reach out as our show to national pain management associations because of that aspect of it. So now, I can't think of a more respectful way to put it. You've got this pincer-like movement. You've got states for whom medical cannabis is a significant part of their pain management program. And now you've got states interfering with folks for whom opioids are a successful part of their pain management program. And they're basically leveling people individually and turning them, just again, on a basic human level, you're destroying these people. And I can't even imagine. This is, from a libertarian perspective, this is why government should not be involved in healthcare.
Absolutely.
I mean, the irony, of course, is that the most well-known oath on the planet, incredibly enough more well-known than the NAP, is the Hippocratic Oath, which is to do no harm.
Yeah.
And yet, because of extra legal governmental pressures, you've got to, as you point out so aptly, and I've realized from other angles, the medical community is in the position of being forced legally to at least create an environment where harm occurs as a result of extra legal government efforts, which of course, as usually are hopelessly misplaced, have no foundation in knowledge or science whatsoever, and are simply a knee-jerk reaction to whatever outrage porn is being transpired by the national media at any one time, if I can sum it up, Counselor.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. And, already in Minnesota, we're seeing suicides. I mean, people I know, we're seeing suicides from this. So the fallout from what has already happened is horrific, and it's going to snowball. It's going to snowball sharply.
Well, I've got to sign off now, so this is sort of the cliffhanger. Let's put this as a cliffhanger, and let's you and I knock heads offline on what we can do from our own little bully pulpits, our own little worlds, to bring attention to the cause. So first of all, I want to thank you for coming on. As usual, your presentation was brilliant, and remarkably personal, and I am grateful for you to sharing that with us. As I said, we'll get this on YouTube and get this out on the podcast right away, because you conveyed about half a dozen or so highly powerful messages in the space of about 50 minutes, which is, if I get one a week, I'm good. That's what I'm shooting for. But I thank you so much for coming on, and let's continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Pat.
Well, again, Kara Schultz, she is with the National Libertarian Party. She works in candidate support. She is a road warrior on that aspect. But most importantly, tonight she spoke to issues revolving around not only the life of the candidate and gave us some personal tips there, but also talked about, well, what happens when you win? Yikes. We finished up with a rather poignant conversation surrounding the rights of the patient. And as important as the libertarian issues are, my takeaway tonight is that we covered some pretty important ground with regard to basic human rights. And again, I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night, and I'm sure you and I will talk soon. Folks, we're going to sign off right now. As always, we've gone late. Thanks to Joe, our operator here, for keeping us sane. Folks, we are the Coalition, loud and proud. As always, we are outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center. Should you listen to this in the coming days or tonight, we'd ask you to follow us at facebook.com/thecoalitionradio, on the mighty Twitter at @coalition_radio. Go to coalitionradio.us where you'll see a link to our YouTube channel, and we've got our podcast up and running. It'll be up on iHeart shortly. It's on Spreaker now, where you can listen to this and some shows from 5, 6, 7 years ago. Some pretty provocative shows. Actually, we're getting to work this week on a presidential candidate who had a couple of libertarian ones who had a couple of run-ins in Belize. One of the more fascinating interviews in our show history. So we'll be certain to put that out to Planet Libertarian. And again, a very special thank you to Kara Schultz for joining us this evening live on a Friday night. Folks, you understand you have a lot of choices to make in terms of your programming, where you can watch, where you can spend your time. We want to thank you for spending time with us tonight or in the future. Stay tuned. We'll be back next week.